Alright, hello, and welcome back to another stream of Sherlock Holmes' book. That being The Sign of the Four. Last time we read this, we finished chapter 4, so we'll be picking up at chapter 5 today. So let me grab my book. Da 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 da. That is the wrong thing. Book. Do, 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 do. Ah, fuck. Where's my book? Ah! Oh no! Oh shit! Stop it. Alright, I got it. It's a bit off kilter. I'm gonna reset that. Book. Select. There we go. Got my book. So I am a bit behind my usual schedule. I was watching Asa's stream, so that was nice. But we were getting a bit too far along in it, and I had to leave early. I'm usually there to the finish. So let's get right into it. All right. Hold on. Chapter 5. The Tragedy of Pondactory Lodge. It was nearly 11 o'clock when we reached the final stage of our night's adventure. We had left the damp fog of the great city behind us, and the night was fairly fine. A warm wind blew from the westward, and heavy clouds moved slowly across the sky, with half a moon peeping occasionally through the rifts. It was clear enough to see some distance, but Thaddeus Shalato, who took down one of the side lamps from the carriage to give us a better light upon our way. Pondicherry Lodge stood in its own grounds, and was grit round with a very high stone wall, topped with broken glass. A single narrow iron-clamped door formed the only means of entrance. On this our guide knocked with a particular postman-like rat-tat. "Who is it?" cried a gruff voice from within. "It is I, McMurdo. You surely know my knock by this time." There was a grumbling sound, and a clanking and a jarring of keys. The door swung heavily back, and a short, deep-chested man stood in the opening, with the yellow light of the lantern shining upon his protruding face and twinkling, distrustful eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Thaddeus, but who are the others? Or that you, Mr. Thaddeus? But who are the others? I had no orders about them from the master." "No, McMurdo, you surprised me. I told... Oh, wait, no, sorry. No, McMurdo, you surprised me. I told my brother last night that I should bring some friends." "You ain't been out of his room today, Mr. Thaddeus, and I have no orders. You know very well that I must stick to regulations. All I can let you in, but your friends must just stop where they are." This was an unexpected obstacle. Thaddeus Shalato looked about him in a perplexed and helpless manner. "This is too bad for you, McMurdo," he said. "If I guarantee them, that is enough for you. There is the young lady, too. She cannot wait on the public road at this hour." "Very sorry, Mr. Thaddeus," said the porter inexorably. "Folk may be friend of yours, and yet no friend of master's. He pays me well to do my duty, and my duty I'll do. I don't know none of your friends." "Oh, yes, you do, Mr. Murdo," cried Sherlock Holmes genially. "I don't think you could have forgotten me. Don't remember the amateur who fought 3 rounds with you at Alison's room on the night of your benefit 4 years back?" "Not Mr. Sherlock Holmes!" roared the prize fighter. "God's truth, how could I mistook you? If instead of standing there so quiet, you had just stepped up and given me that cross hit of yours under the jaw, I'd have known you without a question. Ah, you're one that has to waste your gifts, you have. You might have aimed high if you joined the fancy." "You see, Watson, if all else fails me, I still have one of the scientific professions open to me," said Holmes, laughing. "Our friend will keep us out in the cold now, I'm sure." "In you come, sir, in you come. You and your friends," he answered. "Very sorry, Mr. Thaddeus, but orders are very strict. I had to be certain of your friends before I let them in." Inside, a gravel path wound through desolate grounds to a huge clump of houses, square and prosaic, all plunging into the shadow, save where a moonbeam struck, like one corner, and glimmered in the garret window. The vast size of the building, with its gloom and deathly silence, struck a chill to the heart. Even Thaddeus Shallow seemed ill at ease, and the lantern quivered and rattled in his hand. "I cannot understand it," he said. "There must be some mistake. I distinctly told Bartholomew that we should be here, and yet there's no light in his window. I do not know what to make of it." "Does he always guard the premises in this way?" "Yes, he has followed my father's customs. He was the favourite son, you know, and I sometimes think my father may have told them more than he ever told me. That is Bartholomew's widow up there, or where the moonshine strikes. It's quite bright, but there's no light from within, I think." "Good," said Holmes, "but I see the glint of light in the little window beside the door." "Ah, that's the housekeeper's room. That is where old Mrs. Bernstone sits. She can tell us all about it, or perhaps you would not mind waiting here for a minute or two, for if we all go in together, and she has no word of our coming, she may be alarmed. But hush, what is that?" He held up the lantern, and his hand shook until the circle of light flickered and wavered all around us. Miss Morrison seized my wrist, and we all stood with thumping hearts, straining our ears. From the great black house there sounded through silent night, and saddest, most pitiful of sounds, the shrill, broken whimpering of a frightened woman. "It is Mrs. Bernstone," said Charlotto. "She is the only woman in the house. Wait here, I shall be back in a moment." He hurried for the door, and knocked in a particular way. He could see a tall old woman admit him, and sway with pleasure at the sight of him. "Oh, Mr. Thaddeus, sir, I'm so glad you have come. I'm so glad you have come, Mr. Thaddeus, sir." We heard her interrogate rejoicing until the door was closed, and her voice died away in a muffled tone. Our guide had left us the lantern. Holmes swung it slowly round, and peered keenly at the house, and the great rubbish heaps, each which cumbered the grounds. Miss Morstan and I stood together, and her hand was in mine. A wondrous, subtle thing is love, but here were we two, who had never seen each other before that day, between whom no word or even look of affection ever passed, yet now in this hour of trouble our hands instinctively sought for each other. I had marveled at it since, but at the time it seemed the most natural thing that I should go out to her so, and as she had often told me, there was in her also the instinct to turn to me for comfort and protection. So we stood hand in hand, like 2 children, and there was peace in our hearts for all the dark thing that surrounded us. What a strange place, she said, looking round. It looks as though all the moles in England had been let loose in it. I have seen something of the sort on the side of the hill in Bellishnat, where the prospectors had been at work. And from the same cause, said Holmes. These are traces of the treasure seekers. You must remember that they were 6 years looking for it. No wonder that the grounds look like a gravel pit. At that moment, the door of the house burst open, and Thaddeus Shelto came out running with his hand thrown forward and tearing his eyes. "There is something amiss with Bartholomew!" he cried. "I am frightened. My nerves cannot stand it." He was indeed half bluttering with fear, and twitching, feeble face peeping out from the great Afghan in colour, had the helpless, appealing expression of a terrified child. "Come into the house," said Holmes in his crisp, firm way. "Yes, do," pleaded Thaddeus Shelto. "I really do not feel equal to giving directions." We all followed him into the housekeeper's room, which stood upon the left-hand side of the passage. The old woman was pacing down with a scared look and restless picking fingers. But the sight of Miss Morrison appeared to have soothing effects upon her. "God bless your sweet calm face," she cried with hysterical sobs. "It is me good to see you, but I have been sorely tired this day." Our companion patted her thin, worn hands, and muttered some few words of kindly, womanly comfort, which brought the colour back to the other's bloodless cheeks. "Master has locked himself in and will not answer me," she explained. "All day I have waited to hear from him, for he often likes to be here alone, but an hour ago I feared something was amiss, so I went up and peeked at the keyhole. You must go up, Mr. Thaddeus. You must go up and look for yourself. I have seen Mr. Bartholomew Shelto in joy and in sorrow for 10 long years, but I have never seen him with such a face on him as that." Sherlock Holmes took the lamp and led the way, for Thaddeus Shelto's teeth were chattering in his head. So shaken was he that I had to pass my hand under his arm when we went up the stairs, for his knees were trembling under him. Twice as we ascended, Holmes whipped his lens out of his pocket, carefully examined marks which appeared to me to be mere shapeless smudges of dust upon the cocoanut matting which served as stair carpet. We walked slowly from step to step, holding the lantern and shooting keen glances to right and left. Miss Morrison had remained behind with the frightened housekeeper. The third flight of stairs ended in a straight passage of some length, with a great picture in Indian tapestry upon the right of it, and 3 doors upon the left. Holmes advanced along it in the same slow and methodical way, while we kept close at his heels, with our long black shadows streaming backward down the corridor. The third door was that which we were seeking. Holmes knocked without receiving my answer, and then tried to turn the handle and forced it open. It was locked on the inside, however, and by a broad and powerful bolt. We could see when we set our lamps up against it. The key being turned, however, the hole was not entirely closed. Sherlock Holmes bent down to it, and instantly rose again with a sharp intaking of the breath. "There is something devilish in this, Watson," said he, more moved than I had ever seen him. "What do you make of it?" Hold on. I got laundry going. I'm going to BRB. Alright, I'm back. Needs to dry for longer. I stood up, I stooped to the hole and recoiled in fear. Moonlight was streaming into the room, and was bright with a vague and shifty radiance. I looked straight, and looking straight at me, and suspended as it were, in the air, for all breath was in shadow. There hung a face, that very face of our companion Thaddeus. There with the same high, shining head, the same circular bristle of red hair, the same bloodless contusions. The features were set, however, in a horrible smile, a fixed and unnatural grin, which in that still and moonlit room was more jarring to the nerves than any scowl or contusion. So like was the face that our little friend that I looked round at him to make sure he was indeed with us. Then I recalled to mind that he had mentioned that his brother and he were twins. "This is terrible," I said to Holmes. "What is to be done?" "The door must come down," he answered, springing against it, but put all his weight upon the lock. It cracked, it creaked and groaned, but did not yield. Together we flung ourselves upon it once more. This time it gave way with a sudden snap. We found ourselves within Bartholomew Slato's chamber. It appeared to have been fitted with a chemical laboratory. A double line of glass stupid bottles that was drawn up upon the wall's opposite door, and the table was littered over with Bunsen burners, test tubes, and retorts. In corners stood carboys of acid in wicker baskets. One of these appeared to leak, or to have been broken, for a stream of dark-colored liquid had trickled down from it, and the air was heavy with a particular pungent, tar-like odor. A set of steps stood at one side of the room. In the midst of the litter of lath and plaster above them, there was an opening in the ceiling large enough for a man to pass through. At the foot of the step, a long coil of rope was thrown carelessly together. Give me a moment. Gonna make sure that's off. There's something I've neglected to do. I forgot to post on live because I'm an idiot. That was quite neglectful of me. La di da di da la da 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 da. Da da dun 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 dun. I didn't check my sound. Okay, I think I'm good there. Now I have something here to address, but we'll do that in between lines. Alright. By the table in a wooden armchair, the master of the house was seated all in a heap, with his head sunk upon his left shoulder, that ghastly, inscrutable smile upon his face. He was stiff and cold, and had clearly been dead for many hours. It seemed to me that not only his features, but all limbs were twisted and turned in the most fantastic fashion. By his hands upon the table there lay a particular instrument, a brown, close-grained stick, with a stone head like a hammer, rudely lashed on with coarse twine. Between it was a torn sheet of notepaper with some words scrawled upon it. Holmes glanced it over and handed it to me. "You see," he said with significant raising of eyebrows. In the light of the lantern I read with a thrill of horror, "The Sign of the Four." In God's name, what does all this mean? Or what does it all mean? I asked. "It means murder," said he, stooping over the dead man. "As I expected. Look here." He pointed at what looked like a long, dark thorn stuck in the skin just above the ear. "It looks just like a thorn," I said. "It is a thorn. You may pick it out, but be careful, for it is poisoned." I took it up between my fingers and thumb, and it came away from the skin so readily that hardly a mark was left behind. Only a tiny speck of blood showed where the puncture had been. "This is all an insolvable mystery to me," said I. "It grows darker instead of clearer." "On the contrary," he answered, "it's clear every instant. I only require a few missing links to have an entirely connected case." What? Doing something right quick. Do, 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 do. Just sorry, there was something I needed to do right quick. Something for a game. All right. We had almost forgotten our companion's presence since we had entered the chamber. He was standing in the doorway, the very picture of terror, wringing his hands and moaning to himself. Suddenly, however, he broke out into a sharp, querulous cry. "The treasure is gone," he said. "They have robbed him of the treasure. There is a hole there or which he lowered it. I helped him do it. It was the last person who saw him. I left him here last night. I heard him lock the door as I came downstairs." "What time was that?" "It was 10 o'clock, and now he's dead. The police will be called in. I shall be suspected of having had a hand in it." "Oh, yes, I'm sure I shall." "You don't think so, gentlemen? Surely you don't think that it was I? It is likely that I would have brought you here if it were I. Oh dear, you know that I shall go mad." He jerked his arms and stamped his feet in a kind of convulsive way. Or convulsive frenzy. Why did I think way? "You have no reason for fear, Mr. Charlotto," said Holmes, kindly putting his hand upon his shoulder. "Take my advice. Ride down to the station to report the matter to police. Offer to assist him in every way. We shall wait here until you return." The little man obeyed in a half-stupefied fashion, and heard him stumbling down the stairs in the dark. Chapter 6. Sherlock Holmes gives a demonstration. "Now, Watson," said Holmes, rubbing his hands, "we have a half-hour to ourselves. Let's make good use of it. My case is, as I have told you, almost complete, but we must not err on the side of overconfidence. Simple as the case seems now, there may be something deeper lying underneath it." "Simple!" I ejected. Fuck. This again? God damn it. I can't with this. I'm too immature for this shit. Fuck. Really? It uses ejaculated again? God damn it. Hold on, finishing up the thing. Now. And through. Alright, that's all done. Hold on. Alright, now it's all done. Alright. Hold on. I had to put that in the Discord. "Surely," he said he with some air of clinical professor expounding to his class, "just sit in the corner there. That your footprint might—" Why is there There's a shiny ass car outside that is glaring its way into my eye. "Just sit in the corner there, that your footprints may complicate matters. Now, to work. In the first place, how did your folks come, and how did they go? The door has not been opened since last night. How of the window?" He carried the lamp across to it, muttering the observation loud around the while, but addressing them to himself rather than to me. "The window is nibbled to the—" Alright, it's fixed up now. "Window is nibbled on the inner side. Framework is solid. No hinges at the side. Let us open it. No water pipe near. Roof quite out of reach. Yet a man was mounted by the window. Oh, it rained a little last night. Here is a print of a foot in mould upon the sill. Here is a circular muddy mark. And here again upon the floor. And here again by the table. See here, Watson. It is very pretty demonstrative." I looked at the round, well-defined muddy disc. "This is not a footmark," said I. "It is something much more valuable. It's the impression of a wooden stump. You see here on the sill is a boot mark, a heavy boot with a bored metal heel, and beside it's the mark of the timber toe." "It is a wooden-legged man?" "It is a wooden-legged man." "Quite so. But there has been someone else, a very able and efficient ally. Could you scale that wall, old doctor?" I looked upon the open window. The moon still shone brightly on that angle of the house. We were a good 60 feet from the ground, and look where I would, I could see no foothold. nor as much as crevice in the brickwork. It is absolutely impossible, I answered. Without aid it is so. But suppose you had a friend up here who lowered you this good stout rope which I see in the corner, securing one end of it to this great hook in the wall. Then, I think, if you were an active man, you might swarm up, wooden leg and all. You would depart, of course, in the same fashion. Your ally would draw up the rope and untie it from the hook, shut the windows, snip it on the outside, give away, and get away in the time that he originally came. As a minor point to make notice, that our wooden-legged friend, though a fair climber, was not a professional sailor. His hands were far too horny. No, no, I can't. My lens discloses more than one blood mark, especially towards the end of the rope, from which I gather that he slipped down with such velocity that he took the skin off his hands. This is all very well, I said, the thing becoming intelligible than ever. What about this mysterious ally? How came he into the room? Yes, the ally, repeated Holmes pensively. There are features of interest about the ally. He lifts the case from the region of the commonplace. I fancy that his ally breaks fresh ground in the annals of crime in this country, though parallel cases suggest themselves from India, and if memory serves me, from Singambia. How came he then? I reiterated. The door is locked. The window is inaccessible. Was it through the chimney? The grate is much too small. He answered. I had already considered that possibility. How then? I persisted. You will apply. You will need. You will not apply my precedent. He said, shaking his head. How often have I said to you that when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. We know that he did not come through the window, or through the door, the window, or the chimney. You must know that he could not have been concealed in the room, as there is no concealment possible. Which hence, then, did he come? He came through the hole in the roof, I cried. Of course he did. He must have done so. If you will have the kindness to hold the lamp for me, we shall now extend our researches to the room above, the secret room in which the treasure was found. I mounted the steps and seized a rafter with either hand, and swung him, or he mounted the steps and seized a rafter with either hand, and he swung himself up into the garret. Then, lying on his face, he reached down for the lamp and held it while I followed him. The chamber in which we found ourselves was about 10 feet one way and 6 the other. The floor was formed by the rafters, with thick and lath and plaster between them, so that in walking one had to step from beam to beam. The floor ran up to an apex, and was evidently the inner shelves of the true roof of the house. There was no furniture of any sort. The accumulated dust of years lay thick upon the floor. Here you are, you see, said Sherlock Holmes, putting his hand against the sloping wall. This is a trapdoor which leads out onto the roof. I can press it back, and here is the roof itself, sloping at a gentle angle. This, and then, is the only way by which number one entered. Let us see if we can find any of the traces of his individuality. He held down the lamp to the floor, and as he did, I saw for the second time that night a startling, surprised look come over his face. Myself had followed his gaze. My skin was cold under my clothes. The floor was covered thickly with the prints of a naked foot, clear, well-defined, perfectly formed, but scarce half the size of an ordinary man. Holmes, I said in a whisper, a child has done the horrid thing. He had recovered his self-possession in an instant. I was staggered for the moment. He said, the thing is quite natural. My memory failed me, or I should not have been able to foretell it. There is nothing more to be learned here. Let us go down. What is your theory, then, as to those footmarks? I asked eagerly, when he had regained the lower room once more. My dear Watson, sorry. or try a little analysis yourself," said he with a touch of impatience. "You know my methods. Apply them, and it will be instructive to compare results. I cannot conceive anything which will cover the facts. It will be clear enough to you soon," he said in an off-handed way. "I think that there is nothing else of importance here, but I will look." He whipped out his lens and a tape measure, and carried about the room on his knees, measuring, comparing, examining with his long, thin nose, only a few inches from the planks, his beady eyes gleaming and deep-set like those of a bird. So swift, silent, and virtuous as were his movements, like those of a trained bloodhound, picking out a scent that I could not but think was a terrible criminal he would have made if he had turned his energy and secondary against the law, instead of exerting them in its defence. As he hunted about he kept muttering to himself, and finally he broke out in a loud crow of delight. "We are certainly in luck," said he. "We ought to we ought, we ought to have a very little trouble now. Number one has the misfortune to tread in the coarse stone. You can see the outline of the edge of his small foot here at the sign of the evil-smelling mess. The carboy has been cracked, you see, and the stuff has leaked out." "What then?" I said. "Why, we have got him, that's all," said he. "I know a dog that would follow that scent to the world's end. If a pack can track a trailed Harriet across a shrine, how far can a specifically trained hound follow so pungent a smell as this? It sounds like a sum in the rule of three. The answer should give us but hola! Here are the accredited representatives of the law." Heavy steps and clamors of loud voices were audible from below, and the hall door shut with a loud crash. "Before they come," said Holmes, "just put your hand here, on this poor fellow's arm, and here on his leg. What do you feel?" "The muscles are stiff as a board, are hard as a board," I answered. "Quite so. This is a state of extreme contraction, far exceeding the usual rigor mortis, complete with the distortion of the face, and the Hippocratic smile, or rictus secundus, as the old writers call it. What conclusion would you suggest in your mind?" "Death from some powerful vegetable alkaloid, some stomachic-like substance, which would produce tendinitis." That was the idea which occurred to me the instant I saw the drawn muscles of the face. On getting into the room, I at once looked at the means by which the poison had entered the system. As you saw, I discovered a thorn which had been driven or shot with no great force into the scalp. It observed that the part struck was that which had been turned towards the hole in the ceiling. The man were erect in his chair. Now examine the thorn. I took it gently and held it in the light of the lantern. It was long, sharp, and black, with a glazed look near the point, as though gummy substance was dried upon it. The blunt end had been trimmed and rounded off with a knife. "Is that an English thorn?" he asked. "No, it certainly is not. With all the data, you should be able to draw some just inference. But here are the regulars, so the auxiliary forces must beat a retreat." As he spoke, the steps which were coming near sounded loudly on the passage, and a very stout, portly man in grey suit strode heavily into the room. He was red-faced, burly, and paralytic. A pair of very small, twinkling eyes which looked keenly out from between sullen, puffy pouches. He was closely followed by an inspector in uniform, by the still palpitating Thaddeus Shallow. "Here's a business. Okay, so someone else, not Gregson. "Here's a business," he cried in a muffled, husky tone. "Here's a pretty business. But who are all these? Why, the house seems full of rabbits, Warren." "I think you must recollect me, Mr. Athelney Jones," said Sherlock quietly. "Why, of course I do," he wheezed. "It's Mr. Sherlock Holmes, the theorist. Remember you? I'll never forget how you lectured us That's all on the causes and inference and the effects in the Bishopgate jewel case. It's true you set us on the good right track, but you'll own now that it was more by good luck than good guidance. It was quite a very simple reasoning. Oh, come. Now, come, never be ashamed to own up. But what is all this? Bad business, bad business. Stern facts here. No room for theories. How luckily that I happened to be out of Norwood over on another case. I was at the station when the message arrived. What do you think the man died of? Oh, this is hardly a case for me to theorize over, said Holmes dryly. No, no. Still, we can't deny that you hit the nail on the head sometimes. Dear me, door locked, I understand. Jewels worth $500,000 missing. How was the window? Fastened, but there were steps on the sill. Well, well. If it was fastened, the steps could have nothing to do with the matter. That's common sense. No, it fucking isn't. Man might have died in a fit, and then the jewels are missing. Ha! I have a theory. These flashes come upon me at times. Just step outside, Sergeant. You, Mr. Shallow, your friend can remain. What do you think of this, Holmes? Shallow was, on his own confession, with his brother last night. Brother died in a fit, in which Shallow walked out with the treasure. How's that? Which the dead man very considerably got up and locked the door on the inside. Ah! There's a flaw there. Let me apply common sense to the matter. This Thaddeus Shallow was with his brother. There was a quarrel. So much we know. The brother is dead and the jewels are gone. So much us also we know. No one saw the brother from the time Thaddeus left. Bed has not been slept in. Thaddeus is evidently in the most disturbed state of mind. His appearance, while not attractive. You see, I'm weaving my web around Thaddeus. The net begins to close upon him. I'm sorry, Mr. Spider-Man. You're not quite in possession of the facts yet, said Holmes. This splinter of wood, which I have every reason to believe be poison, was in the man's scalp, where you see the mark. This card, inscribed as you see it. It was on the table, and beside it lay this curious stone-headed instrument. How does all that fit into your theory? Confirms it in every respect, said the fat detective pompously. House is full of Indian curiosities. Thaddeus brought this up. If this splinter be poisonous, Thaddeus may have made murderous use of it as any other man. The card is some hocus pocus. As blind as like as not. The only question is how he departed. Of course, here's a hole in the roof. The great activity, considering his bulk, sprang up the steps and squeezed into the garret. Immediately afterwards, we heard his exhilarating. Oh, wait, hold on. With great activity, considering his bulk, he sprang up the steps and squeezed into the garret. Immediately afterwards, we heard his exhilarating voice proclaim he had found the trapdoor. He can find something, remarked Holmes, shrugging his shoulders. He is occasionally glimmers of reason. Il n'a pas de sort si incomune disser. I can't speak Spanish, or is this Latin? Que sa queen onde es vert. You see, said Aldridge Jones, reappearing down the steps again. Facts are more than mere theories, after all. My view of the case has been confirmed. There's a trapdoor communicating with the roof, and it's partly open. It was I who opened it. Oh, indeed, you did notice it then. Seemed a little chestfallen at the discovery. Well, whoever noticed it shows how our gentleman got away, Inspector. Yes, sir, from the passage. Ask Mr. Shallow to step this. Ask Mr. Shallow to step away. Mr. Shallow. Oh, it's my duty to inform you that anything which you may say will be used against you. I arrest you in the Queen's name as being concerned in the death of your brother. There now, didn't I tell you? Cried the poor man, throwing out his hands and looking from one to the other of us. Don't trouble yourselves out here, Mr. Shallow. About it, Mr. Shallow, said Holmes. I think that I can engage to clear you of the charge. Don't promise. It's too much. That's Mr. Theorist. Don't promise too much, snapped the detective. You may find it a harder matter than you think. Not only will I clear him, Mr. Jones, but I will make you a free present of the name and description of the two people who were in the room last night. His name, I have every reason to believe, is Jonathan Small. He is a poorly educated man, small, active, with the right leg off, wearing a wooden stump which is worn away upon his side. His left boot has a coarse square-toe sole with an iron band round the heel. He is a middle-aged man, much sunburned, and has been a convict. There are very few indications maybe of some assistance to you, coupled with the fact there is a good deal of skin missing from the palm of his hand. The other man. Ah, the other man! Said Allergy Jones in a sneering voice, but the impression none the less, as I could easily see by the precision of the manner. He's a rather curious person, said Sherlock, turning upon his heel. I hope before long be able to introduce you to the pair of them. A word with you, Watson. He led me out to the head of the stairs. This is an unexpected occurrence, said he. Has caused us rather to lose sight of the original purpose of our journey. I have just been thinking so, I answered. It is not right that Mrs. Morrison should remain in this stricken house. No, you must escort her home. She lives with Mrs. Saul Foster at Lower Chamberlain, and that's not very far. I will wait for you here if you will drive out again, or perhaps you are too tired. By no means. I don't think I could rest until I know more of this fantastic business. I have seen something of this rough side of life, but I give you my word that this quick succession of strange surprises tonight has shaken my nerves completely. I should like, however, to see the matter through with you, now that I have got so far. Your presence will be of great service to me, he answered. We shall work this case out independently, and leave this fellow, Jones, to exult over any mare's nest, which he may choose to consult. When you have dropped Mrs. Morrison, I will wish you to go to number 3, Pension Lane, and down near the water's edge at Lambeth, the third house on the right. Inside, a bird stuffer, Sherman is the name. You'll see a weasel holding a young rabbit in the wall. Knock old Sherman up and tell him of my compliments. Then I want Toby at once. You'll bring Toby back in the cab with you. A dog, I suppose. Yes, a queer mongrel with the most amazing power of scent. I'd rather have Toby help me than any of the whole detective force of London. I shall bring him then, said I. It is 1 now. I ought to be back before 3, if I can get a fresh horse. And I, said Holmes, shall see what I can learn from Mrs. Burstone and from the Indian servant, who Mr. Thaddeus tells me sleeps in the next garret. And I shall study the great Jones' methods and listen to his not too delicate sarcasms. Urson and Gorman does die mention version was in Nasher Verstand. Goth, it is always pity. Ah, man, I probably really butchered that. Chapter 7. The Episode of the Barrel. The police had brought a cab with them, and in this I escorted Mrs. Morrison back to her home. After the angelic fashion of women, she had bore her trouble with a calm face, as long as there was one weaker than herself to support. Sorry. I had found her bright and placid by the side of the frightened housekeeper. In the cab, however, she first turned faint, and then burst into a passion of weeping. So sorely had she tried by the adventures of the night. She had told me since that she thought me cold and distant upon that journey. She little guessed the struggle within my breast and the effort of self-restraint which had held me back. My sympathies and my love went out to her, even as my hand had in the garden. I felt that the years of con conventional. I know that's not condolences because there's no D. Conventionalities of life could not teach me to know her sweet, brave nature as had this one day of strange experiences. Yet were two thoughts which sealed the words of affection upon my lips. She was weak and helpless, shaken in mind. It was to take her at this advantage to obtrude love upon her at such a time. Worse still, she was rich. If Holmes' research was correct, she would be an heiress. Was it fair, was it honourable, that a half-paced surgeon should take such advantage of an intimacy which chance had brought about? Might she not look upon me with mere vulgar fortune-seeker? I could not bear to risk that such a thought could cross her mind. This awkward treasure inverted like an impassable barrier between us. It was nearly 2 o'clock when we reached Mrs. Seal Foster's. The servant had retired hours ago, but Mrs. Foster had been so interested by the strange message which Miss Morstan had received that she sat down in the hopes of her return. She opened the door herself, a middle-aged, graceful woman, and it gave me joy to see how tenderly her arm stole around the other's waist, and how motherly was the voice in which she greeted her. She was clearly no mere paid dependent, but an honoured friend. I was introduced, and Miss Foster earnestly begged me to step in and tell her our adventures. I explained, however, the importance of my errand, and promised faithfully to call and report any progress which we might make with the case. As we drove away, I stole a glance back. I still seemed to see that little group on the step, the two graceful, clean figures, the half-open door, the hall light shining through the stained glass, the barometer and bright stair-rods. It was soothing to catch even that passing glimpse of tranquil English home in the midst of the wild, dark business which had absorbed us. And the more I thought of what had happened, the wilder and darker it grew. I reviewed the whole extraordinary sequence of events as I rattled through the silent, gas-lit streets. There was the original problem. That, at least, I was pretty clear now. The death of the Captain Morstan and sending the pearls, the advertisement, the letter. We had light upon all these events. They had only led us, however, to a deeper and far more tragic mystery. The Indian treasure, the curious plan found amongst the Morstan baggage, and the strange scene at Major Salanto's death. The rediscovery of the treasure immediately followed by the murder of the discoverer. The very singular accompaniment to the crime. The footsteps, the remarkable weapons, the word upon the car, the corresponding those with Captain Morstan's chart. Here was indeed a labyrinth in which a man less singularly endowed than my fellow lodger might as well disappear of ever finding the clue. Pigeon Lane was a row of shabby two-storied brick houses in the lower quarter of Lambeth. I had to knock for some time. I met number 3 before I could make my impression. At last, however, there was a glint of a candle behind the blind, and a face looked out at the upper window.
"Go on, you chicken and vagabond,"
said the face.
"If you kick up any more row, I'll open the kennels and let my 43 dogs upon you."
"If you'll let one out, it's just what I came for," said I.
"Go on," said the voice. "So help me gracious, I've a whipper in the bag, and I'll drop it on you if you don't hook it."
"But I want a dog," I cried.
I won't be argued with," shouted Sherman. "Now stand clear, for I say 3, down goes the whipper."
"Mr. Sherlock Holmes," I began. The words had the most magical effect, for the windows instantly slammed down. Within a minute the door was unbarred and open. Mr. Sherman, with a lanky, lean old man, with stooping shoulders, a stringy neck, and blue-tinted glasses.
"A friend of Sherlock Holmes is always welcome," said he. "Step in, sir. Keep clear of the badger, for he bites. Naughty, would you take a nip at the gentleman?"
This to a stout, but which thrust its wicked head and red eyes between the bars of its cage.
"Don't mind that, sir. It's only a slow worm. It ain't got no fangs, so I give it to them. runs out of the room, so it keeps the beetles down. You might not mind my being just a little short with you at first, for I'm geared up by the children the minute one just comes down this lane to knock me up. What was it that Sherlock Holmes wanted, sir?
He wanted a dog of yours.
Oh, Toby.
Yes, Toby was the name.
Toby lives at number 7 on the left here.
He moved slowly forward with his candle among the queer animal family which he had gathered around him. In the uncertain shadowy light, I could see dimly that there were glancing, glimmering eyes. These peeped down at us from every cranny and corner. Even the rafters above our heads were lined by sullen fowl, who lazily shifted their weights from one leg to the other as our voices disturbed their slumber. Excuse me. Toby proved to be an ugly, long-haired, lop-eared creature, half spaniel and half lurcher, brown and white in colour, with a very clumsy, waddling gait. It accepted, after such hesitation, of a lump of sugar, with an old naturalist handed to me, and having thus sealed an alliance, it followed me to the cab, and made no difficulties about accompanying me. It had struck 3 at the palace clock when I found myself back once more at Pondicherry Lodge. The ex-prize-fighter McMurdo had, I found, been arrested as an accessory. Both he and Mr. Charlotto had marched off to the station. 2 constables guarded the narrow gate. They allowed me to pass with a dog on my mentioning the detective's name. Mr. Holmes was standing on the doorstep with his hands in his pockets, smoking his pipe. You have him there," said he. "Good dog, then. Ashley Jones is gone. We had an immense display of energy since you left. He is arrested not only for Thaddeus, but the gatekeeper, housekeeper, and Indian servant. We have the police to ourselves, but for a sergeant upstairs. Leave the dog here and come up." We tied Toby to the hall table and reascended the stairs. The room was as he had left it, save that a sheet had been dropped on the central figure, a wary-looking police sergeant, and reclined in the corner. "Lend me your bull's-eye, Sergeant," said my companion. "Now tie this bit of cord round my neck, and as to hang it in front of me. Thank you. Now I must kick off my boots and stocking. Just you carry them down with you, Watson. I'm going to do a little climbing, and dip my handkerchief in the chest-dog. That will do. Now, come up to the garret with me for a moment." We clambered up through the hole. Holmes turned his light once more upon the footstep into the dust. "I wish you practically to notice these footmarks. Do you notice anything noteworthy about them?" "They belong," I said, "to a child or a small woman. Apart from their size, though, they're nothing else. They appear to be much as other footmarks." "Not at all. Look here. This is the print of a right foot in the dust. Now I'll make out with my naked foot beside it. What is the chief difference?" "Your toes are all cramped together. The other print has toes distinctly divided." "Quite so. That is the point. Bear that in mind. Now, would you kindly step over to the flap window and smell the edge of the woodwork? I shall stay here, as I have this handkerchief in my hand." I did as he directed, and instantly curious of a strong, tarry smell. "That is where he put his foot in getting out. If you can trace him, I should think that Toby will have no difficulty. Now run downstairs, loose the dog, and look for Bloodin." By the time I got into the ground, Sherlock Holmes was on the roof. I could see him like an enormous glowworm, crawling very slowly along the roof, or along the ridge. I lost sight of him behind a stack of chimneys, but he presently reappeared and then vanished once more upon the opposite side. When I made my way round, there I found him seated at one of the corner's eaves. "That you, Watson?" he cried. "Yes." "This is the place. What is that black thing down there?" "A water barrel." "Top on it?" "Yes." "No sign of a ladder?" "No." "Confound this fellow. It's a most breakneck place. I ought to be able to come down where he could climb up. The water pipes feel pretty firm. Here goes anything. Or here goes, anyhow." There was a scuffling of feet. The lantern began to close steadily down the side of the wall. Then with a light spring he came on the barrel, on from there to the earth. It was easy to follow him, he said, drawing on his stockings and boots. Tiles were loosened the whole way along, and in his hurry he dropped this. Contains my diagnosis, as you doctors express it. The object which he held up to me was a small pocket or pouch woven out of a coloured grasses and a few tawny beads, each strung around it. In shape and size it was unlike a cigarette case. It was not unlike a cigarette case. Inside were half a dozen spines of dark wood, sharp at one end, rounded at the other, like that which had struck Bartholomew Sholto. "They are hellish things," said he. "Get out that you don't prick yourselves. I'm delighted to have them, for the chances that they are all he has, there is less fear of you or me finding one in our skin before long. I would sooner face a Martin bullet myself. Are you game for a 6-mile trudge, Watson?" "Certainly," I answered. "Your leg will stand it?" "Oh, yes." "Here you are, doggy. Good old Toby. Smell it, Toby, smell it." He pushed the crescent handkerchief under the dog's nose, while the creature stood on his fluffy legs, separated and most comical, cocked its head, like a connoisseur sniffing the bouquet of famous vintage. Holmes then threw the handkerchief to the distance, fastened a stout cord to the mongrel's collar, and led him to the foot of the water barrel. The creature instantly broke into a succession of high tremulous yelps, with his nose on the ground, his tail in the air, or pattered off upon the trail of a pace which strained his leash and kept up at the top of our speed. Ooh, need some water. The east had been the east had gradually whitening, and we could now see some distance in the cold grey light. The square, massive house, with its black, empty windows and high, bare walls, towered up, sad and forlorn, behind us. Our course led us right across the grounds, in and out among the trenches and pits which were scattered and intersected the whole place with its scattered dirt heaps and ill-grown shrubs, had blight and ill-omened look which harmonized with the black tragedy which hung over it. On reaching the boundary wall, Toby ran along it, whining eagerly underneath its shadow, and stopped finally in a corner screeched by young beeches, which the two walls joined. Several bricks had been loosened, and the crevices left were worn down and rounded upon the lower side, as though they had been frequently used to the latter. Holmes clambered up, and taking the dog from me, he dropped it over the other side. "There's the print of the woodleg's hand," he remarked as I mounted up beside him. "You see the slight smudge of blood upon the white plaster. What a lucky thing it is that we had no very heavy rain since yesterday. The scent will lie upon the road in spite of their 8-and-20 hours start." I confess that I had my doubts myself when I reflected upon the great traffic which had passed along London's road in the intervals. My fears were soon appeased, however. Toby never hesitated or swerved, but waddled on in his particular rolling fashion. Clearly the pungent smell of the crescent it rose high above all other contending scents. "Do not imagine," said Holmes, "that I depend for my success in this case upon a mere chance of one of these fellows having put his foot in the chemical. I have knowledge now which has enabled me to trace them in many different ways. This, however, is the readiest. His unfortunate has put it in my hand. I should be culpable if I neglect it. It has, however, prevented the case from becoming the little pretty little intellectual problem which at one point promised to be. There might have been one credit to be gained out of it, but for this too palpable clue." "There is credit, and to spare," said I. "I assure you, Holmes, that I marvel at the means by which you obtained the results in this case, even more than I did the Jefferson Hopes murder. The thing seems to be deeper and more inexplicable, How, for example, could you describe with such confidence the wooden-legged man? Pshaw, my dear boy, it is simplicity itself. I think that's the precursor to elementary, my dear Watson, that they used in the show, well, the first show, which got the phrase in pop culture. I think that might be the origins. Is it's simplicity itself. I don't wish to be theatrical. It is all patent and above board. Two officers were in command of convict guard who had learned an important secret to a buried treasure. A map is drawn on for them by an Englishman named Jesse Johnson Small. You remember that we saw the name upon the chart in Captain Morrison's possession. He has signed it in behalf of himself and his associates, the sign of the four, as he somewhat dramatically called it. Aided by this chart, the officers, or one of them, gets the treasure, brings it to England, leaving, we will suppose, some condition under which he receives it unfulfilled. Now then, why did not Jonathan Small get the treasure himself? The answer is obvious. The chart is dated at the time when Morrison was brought into close association with convicts. Jonathan Small did not get the treasure because he and his associates were themselves convicts and could not get away. But that is mere speculation, said I. It is more than that. It's the only hypothesis which covers the facts. Let us see how it fits with the sequel. Major Sholto remains at peace for some years, happy in the possession of his treasure, which he receives a letter from India which gives him a great fright. What was that? A letter to say that the men whom he had wronged had been set free, or had escaped. That is much more likely, for he would have known what their term of imprisonment was. It would not have been a surprise for him. What does he do then? He guards himself against a wooden-legged man, a white man, mark you, for he mistakes a white tradesman for him, and actually fires a pistol at him. Now, only one white man's name is on the chart. The others are Hindu and Mohammedan. The Mohammedans. I don't know what that means. Like Islamic people? Oh. Oh yeah, that's probably it. There is no other white man. Therefore, we may say with confidence that the wooden-legged man is identical with Jonathan Small. Does the reason strike you as being faulty? No, it is clear and concise. Well now, let us put ourselves in the place of Jonathan Small. Let us look at it from his point of view. When he comes to England with the double idea of regaining what he would consider to be his rights, and having his revenge upon the man who he had wronged, he found out that Charlotte lived, and very possibly established communications with someone inside the house. There is a butler, Laroux, who we have not seen. Mrs. Brinston gives him far from a good character. Small could not find out, however, where the treasure was hid, when no one ever knew, save the Major and one faithful servant who has died. Suddenly Small learned that the Major is on his deathbed. In a frenzy, lest for the secret of the treasure die with him, he runs gauntly on the grounds, makes his way to the dying man's window, is only deterred from entering by the presence of the two sons. Mad with hate, however, against the dead man, he enters the room that night, searches his private papers in the hopes of discovering some memorandum relating to the memorandum. Oh, it is memorandum relating to the treasure, and finally leaves a memo of his visit in the short inscription upon the card. He has doubtless his plan beforehand that should he slay the Major, he would leave such record upon the body as a sign that it is not a common murder, but from the point of view of the four associates, something in the nature of an act of justice, whimsical, bizarre, or convenience of this kind of common, enough of annals of crime, and usually afforded value in indications as to criminal. Do you follow all this? Very clearly. Now, what could Jonathan Small do? We could only continue to keep a secret upon all the efforts made. He could only continue to keep a secret. Watch upon the efforts made to find the treasure. Possibly he leaves England and only comes back at intervals. Then comes the discovery of the garret. He is instantly informed of it. He began to trace the presence of some Confederate? Oh, okay, I know what he's using to confederate in the household. Jonathan, with his wooden leg, utterly unable to reach the lofty rooms of Bartholomew's chateau. He takes with him, however, a rather curious associate, who gets over this difficulty but dips his naked foot in creased stone, which hence, with hence comes Toby, a 6 mile limb for a half-pay officer, with a damaged tendon, Achilles. But it was the associate, not Jonathan, who committed the crime. Quite so, and rather to Jonathan's disgust to judge by the way he stamped out when he got into the room. He bore no grudge against Bartholomew Sholto, and would have preferred if he could just been simply bounded and gagged. He did not wish to put his head in a halter. There is no help for it, however. The savage instincts of his companion had broken out. The poison had done its work. So Jonathan Small left his record, lowered the treasure box to the ground, and followed it himself. That was the trend of events as I can decipher them. Of course, as to his personal appearance, he must be middle-aged and must be sunburned after serving time in such an oven as the Adamants. His height, readily calculated from the length of his stride. We know that he is bearded. His hairiness was one point which impressed itself upon Thaddeus Sholto as he saw himself at the window. I do not know that there is anything else. The associate! Oh, well, there's no great mystery in that. But you will know all about it soon enough. How sweet the morning air is. See how that one little cloud floats like a pink feather, or from some gigantic flamingo. Now the red rim of the sky pushes itself over the London cloud bank. It shines on a good many people, but on none, I dare bet, who are a stranger errand than you and I. How small we feel with our petty ambitions, striving into this presence of great elemental forces of nature. Are you well up in your John Paul? Fairly so. I worked back to him through Cartall. That was like I followed the brook to the parent lake. He makes one curious but profound mark. It is that the chief proof of the man's real greatest lies in his perception of his own smallness. If argues you see a power of comparison and of appreciation within itself, which is in itself a proof of nobility. There isn't much food for the thought in Richter. You have not a pistol, have you? I have my stick. Do you have a gun? I got a stick. Well, I guess I'll do. It is possible that we may need something of the sort if we get into the lair. Jonathan, I shall leave to you, but if the other turns nasty, I shall shoot him dead. He took out his revolver as he spoke. Having loaded 2 of the chambers, he put it back into the right-hand pocket of his jacket. We had during this time been following the guidance of Toby down the half-rural villa-lined roads which led to the metropolis. However, we were beginning to come among continuous streets where labourers, dockmen were already astir, and slatternly, that's a weird-ass word, what does that mean? Dirty and untidy, typically used as a woman and or her appearance. Wow, what a rude-ass word. Were taken down from their shutters and brushing doorsteps at the square-topped corner public houses. Business was just beginning. Okay, at the square-topped corner public house. What is the inflections of this sentence? God damn. At the square-topped corner public houses, business was just beginning, and rough-looking men were emerging, rubbing their sleeves across their beards after their morning wet. Strange dogs sauntered up and started wandering at us as we passed. But our inimitable old Toby looked neither to the right nor to the left, but trotted onward with his nose to the ground, an occasional eager whine which spoke of a hot scent. We had traversed, Streatham, Brixton, Camberwell, and now found ourselves in Kennington Lane, which, having borne away such a side street to the east of the Oval, the men whom we had pursued seemed to have taken a curiously zigzagged road, with the idea probably of escaping observation. They had never kept to the main road, if a parallel side street had served their turn. At the foot of Kennington Lane, they had edged away to the left through Bond Street and Miles Street. Where the latter street turned to Knight's Place, Toby ceased to advance, but began to run backwards and forwards with one ear cocked, the other drooping, the very picture of a canine indecision. He then waddled around in a circle, looked up at us from time to time, to ask for sympathy in his embarrassment. "What the deuce is the matter with the dog?" growled Holmes. "They surely would not take a cab or go off in a balloon." "Perhaps they stood here for some time." "He's all right. He's off again," said my companion in a tone of relief. He was indeed far off, for after sniffing around, he suddenly made up his mind and darted away with an energy and determination such as he had not yet shown. The scent appeared to be much hotter than before, for he had not even put his nose to the ground, but tugged at his leash, trying to break into a run. I could see by the gleam in Holmes' eyes that he thought he was nearing the end of a journey. Our course now ran through Nine Elms until we came to Borderick and Nelson's large timber yard, just past the White Eagle Tavern. Here the dog, frantic and with excitement, turned down through the side gate and into the enclosure, which the Sawyers were already at work. On the dog raced through sawdust and shavings, down an alley, round a passage, between two wood piles, and finally, with a triumphant yelp, sprang upon a large barrel which still stood on the hand trolley on which it had been brought. With lolling tongue and blinking eyes, he stood up upon the cask, looking from one to the other of us for some sign of appreciation. The stays of the barrel and the wheels of the trolley were smeared with dark liquid, and the whole air was heavy with a smell of christening. Sherlock and I looked blankly at each other, then burst simultaneously into an uncontrollable fit of laughter. Whew. What the hell? Hold on. Oop. Okay. Chapter 8. The Baker Street Irregulars. "What now?" I asked. "Toby has lost the character for infallibility." "He acted according to his lights," said Holmes, lifting down from the barrel and walking him out of the timber yard. "If you consider how much the kerosene is coated about the London in one day, it is no great wonder that a trail should have been crossed. It is much used now, especially for the seasonings of wood. Poor Toby is not to blame." "We must get back on the main scent again, I suppose." "Yes, unfortunately, we have no distance to go." Evidently what puzzled the dog at the corner of Knight's Place was that there were two different trails running in opposite directions. We took the long one. It only remains to follow the other. There is no difficulty about this. On leading Toby to the place where he had committed his fault, he cast about in a wide circle, and finally dashed off in a fresh direction. "We must take care that he does not now bring us to a place where the kerosene barrel came from." "I had thought of that, but you notice that he keeps on the pavement, whereas the barrel passed down the roadways. Now we are on the true scent. Now." It tended down towards the riverside, running through Balmain Place and Prince Street. At the end of Broad Street, it ran right down to the water's edge, where there was a small wooden wharf. Toby led us to the very edge of this, and stood there whining, looking out on the dark current below. "We are out of luck. They've taken a boat here," said Holmes. "They've taken into a boat here." Several small punts and skiffs were laying around the water at the edge of the wharf. We took Toby around to each of them, but even though he sniffed them earnestly, he made no sign. Close to the rude landing stage was a small brick house with a wooden palace slung out through the second window. For Sadie E. Smith was printed across its large letters, and underneath, boats to hire by the hour or day. A second inscription above the door informed us that a steam launch was kept, a statement which was confirmed by a great pile of coke upon the jetty. What? Sherlock Holmes looked slowly round, his face assumed with an ominous expression. Hmm. A landing stage or small pier in which boats can be docked or moored. A steam launch was kept, a statement which was confirmed by a great pile of coke upon the... What does that mean? Uh, uh, give me a moment here. I'm looking up what the hell this means. Da 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 da. And, does it literally just mean cocaine? What the hell? This is so weird. That's so fucking weird. This looks bad, said he. These fellows are sharper than I expected. They seem to have covered their tracks. There has, I fear, been preconcerted with management here. He was approaching the door of the house, which, when it opened, a little curly-haired lad of 6 came running out, followed by a stoutish, red-faced woman, and with a large sponge in her hand. Okay, be right back. Gotta check my laundry again. Alright, I'm back. Clothes still need longer in the dryer. You come here! You come back here and be washed, Jack! She shouted. Come back, you young imp! For
If your father comes home and finds you like that, he'll let us hear it."
"Dear little chap," said Holmes strategically. "What a rosy-cheeked young rascal. Now, Jack, is there anything you would like?" The youth pondered for a moment.
"I liken a shilling,"
said he. "Nothing you would like better?"
"I like 2 shillings better,"
the prodigy answered, with some thought.
"Here you are, then. Catch a fine child, Mrs. Smith."
Sorry, that was supposed to be him. "Here you are, then. Catch a fine child, Mrs. Smith."
"Law bless you, sir. He is that, and I'm forward. You're getting a'most too much for my manage, especially when my man is. Law bless you, sir. He is that, and forward. He gets a'most too much for me to manage, especially when my man is away days at time."
"Away, is he?" said Holmes, in a disappointed voice. "I'm sorry for that. For I wanted to speak to Mr. Smith."
"He is away since yesterday morning, sir, and nothing to tell. I'm beginning to feel frightened about him, but if I was about a boat, sir, maybe I could serve you well."
"I wanted to hire his steam launch."
"Why, bless you, sir, it is in the steam launch that he has gone. That's about puzzles me, for I know there ain't no more coal than that would take her to get to Woolwich and back. If he had been away in the barge, I'd have thought nothing for it. Many times the job he's taken him as far as Graveston. Then if much else, or if there was much doing there, he might have stayed over. That good as a steam launch without coals."
"He might have bought some at the wharf down the river."
"He might, sir, but he weren't his way. Many a time I've heard him call out the prices they charge for a few odd bags. Besides, I don't like that wooden-legged man with his ugly face and outlandish talk. But did he want always knocking about here for?"
"A wooden-legged man," said Holmes, with bland surprise.
"Yes, sir, a brown monkey face." "Oh, God. That's so rude." "Yes, sir, a brown monkey-faced chap that's called more than once for an old man, and him that roused him up yesterday. And what more, my man knew he was coming, for he had steam up in the launch, and I tell you straight, sir, I don't feel easy in my mind about it."
"But my dear Mrs. Smith," said Holmes, shrugging his shoulders, "you will frighten yourself about noticing. How could you possibly tell that it was the wooden-legged man who came here in the night? I don't understand how you can be so sure."
"His voice, sir. I knew his voice, which is kind of thick and foggy. He tapped at the winder, about 3 it would be. 'Show a leg, Maggie,' say he. 'Time to turn out. Oh, God.' My old man woke up Jim, and that's my eldest, away, and they went without so much as a word to me. I could hear the wooden leg clacking on the stone."
"And was the wooden-legged man alone?"
"Couldn't say I am sure, sir. I didn't hear no one else."
"I'm sorry, Mrs. Smith, for I wanted a steam launch. I heard good reports of the, let me see, what is her name?"
"The Yara, sir?"
She's not that old green launch with the yellow line, very broad in the beam."
"No, indeed. She's as trim a little thing as any river. She's been fresh painted back with 2 red streaks."
"Thanks. I hope that you will hear soon from Mr. Smith. I'm going down to the river. If I should see anything of the Aura, I should let him know that you are uneasy. A black funeral, you say?"
"No, sir, black with a white band."
Of course. It was the sides which were black. Good morning, Mrs. Smith. There's a boatman here with the wherry, Watson. We shall take it across the river." "The main thing with people of that sort," said Holmes, as he sat in the streets of the wherry, "is never let them think that your information can be used to the slightest importance to you. If you do, they will instantly shut up like an oyster. If you listen to them under protest, as it were, you are very likely to get what you want." "Of course, now seems pretty clear," said I. "What would you do then?" I would engage a launch and go down to the river on the track of the Aura. My dear friend, it would be a colossal task. Should we have touched at any wharf of the other side of the stream between here and Greenwich, below the bridge there was a perfect labyrinth of landing places for miles. It would take you days and days to exhaust them if you set about it alone. Employ the police, then. No, I shall probably call Hourly Jones in at the last moment. He is not a bad fellow, and I would not like to do anything which would injure him professionally. But I have a fancy for working it out myself, now that we have gone so far. Could we advertise, then ask for information from warfarers? Worse and worse. Our men would know that the chase was hot at their heels, and they would be off out of the country. As it is, they are likely enough to leave, but as long as they think they are perfectly safe, they will be in no hurry. Jones's energy will be of use to us there, for his views of the case is sure to push itself into the daily press, and the runaways will think that everyone is off on the wrong scent. What are we to do, then? I asked, as we landed near Milkbank Penitentiary. That's not penitentiary, that's penitentiary. Penitentiary is a lot shorter. Penitentiary? I don't know. It looks kind of like penitentiary, but there's too many I's as well. Take this, handsome. Drive home and have some breakfast. Get an hour's sleep. It's quiet on the cars. We may be afoot tonight again. Stop at the telegram office, cabby. We will keep Toby, for he may be of use to us yet. We pulled up at the Great Peter Street post office, and Holmes dispatched his wire. Whom do you think that is to? He asked as we resumed our journey. I am sure I don't know. You remember the Baker Street division of the detective police force in whom I employed the Jefferson Hopes case. Well, said I, this is just the case which they might be invaluable if they fail. I have another resource, but I shall try them first. The wires to my dirty little Lieutenant Wiggins. I expect that he and his gang will be with us before we have finished our breakfast. It was between 8 and 9 o'clock, and I was conscious of a strong reaction after the excitements of the night. I was limp and weary, befogged in mind and fatigued in body. I had not the professional enthusiasm which carried my companion on, nor could I look at the matter with a mere abstract intellectual problem. As far as the death of Bartholomew Sholto went, I heard little good of him, and could feel no intense empathy. That is not empathy, that's antipathy to his murderers. The treasure, however, was a different matter. That, or part of it, belonged rightfully to Mrs. Morstan. While there was a chance of recovering it, I was ready to devote my life to one object. True, if I found it, I would probably put her forever beyond my reach. Yet it would be a petty and selfish love which would be influenced by such a thought as that. If Holmes would work to find the criminals, I had tenfold stronger reason to urge me to find the treasure. A bath at Baker Street, and a complete change freshened me up wonderfully. While I came down to my room, I found the breakfast laid, and Holmes pouring out the coffee. Here it is, he said, laughing, pointing at an unopened newspaper. The energetic Jones and ambitious reporters have fixed it up between them, but they've had enough of the case. But you've had enough of the case. Better have your ham and eggs first. Ham and eggs sound awesome. I took the paper from it and read the short notice, which was headed Mysterious Business at Upper Northwood. Above 12 o'clock last night, the Standard, Mr. Bartholomew Sholto, of Pondicherry Lodge, Upper Northwood, was found dead in his room, under circumstances which point to foul play. As far as we can learn, no actual traces of violence were found upon Mr. Sholto's person, but a valuable collection of Indian gems which the deceased gentleman had inherited from his father had been carried off. The discovery was first made by Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, who had called at the house with Mr. Thaddeus Sholto's brother of the deceased. By a singular piece of good fortune, Mr. Arthur Jones, the well-known member of the detective police force, happened to be at Northwood Police Station, was on the grounds within an hour of the first alarm. His trained and experienced facilities were at once directed towards the detection of the criminals, with the gratifying result that the brother, Thaddeus Shalato, had already been arrested, together with the housekeeper, Mrs. Brunston, an Indian butler named Larallo, and a porter or gatekeeper named McMurdo. It is quite certain that the thief or thieves were as well acquainted with the house for Mr. Jones' well-known technical knowledge that his powers of minute observation had enabled him to prove conclusively that the miscreants could not have entered by the door or by the window, which was made way across the roof of the building, and through a trap door in the roof which communicated with that in which the body was found. The fact which has been very clearly made out proves conclusively that it is no mere haphazard burglary. The prospects and energetic actions of the officers of the law shows a great advantage of the presence, in which the occasions of a single, vigorous, and masterful mind. We cannot but think that it supplies an argument to those who would wish to see our detectives more decentralized, and so brought into closer and more effective touch with the cases which it is their duty to investigate. "Isn't it gorgeous?" said Holmes, grinning over his coffee cup. "What do you think of it?" "I think that we had close shaves ourselves of being arrested for the crime." "So do I. I wouldn't answer for our safety now, if he should happen to have another of his attacks of energy." At this moment there was a loud ring at the bell, and I could hear Mrs. Hudson, our landlady, raising her voice in a wail of expostulation and dismay. "By heavens!" Oh, sorry, I thought that was him. Or, "By heavens, Holmes," I said, rising up. "I believe that they really are after us." "No, it is not quite so bad as that. It's an unofficial force, the Baker Street Irregulars." As we spoke, there came a swift pattering of naked feet upon the stairs, a clatter of high voices, and rushed in a dozen dirty and ragged little street Arabs. "Children! They are children!" There was some show of discipline among them, and despite their tumultuous entry, they instantly drew up in line, stood facing us with expectant faces. One of their number, taller and older than the others, stood forward with an air of lounging superiority, which was very funny in such a disreputable little scarecrow. "Got your message, sir," said he. "Want 'em on sharp. 3 bob and a tanner for tickets." "Here you are," said Holmes, producing some silver. "In future they can report to you, Wiggins, and you to me. I cannot have the house invaded in this way. However, it is just as well you should all hear the instructions. I want to find the whereabouts of a steam launch called the Aurora. Owner, Medardus Smith. Black with 2 red streaks, funnel black with white band. Funeral." "That's not the description she gave you." "Interesting." "She's down the river, somewhat. I want one boy to be at Mordecai Smith's landing stage opposite Milkbank to see if the boat comes back. You must divide it out amongst yourselves, and do both banks thoroughly. Let us know the moment you have the news. Is all clear?" "Yes, Governor," said Wiggins. "The old scale of pay, and a guinea to the boy who finds the boat. Here's a day in advance. Now off you go." He handed them a shilling each, and away they buzzed down the stairs, and I saw them a moment later streaming down the street. "If the lunch is above water, they will find her," said Holmes as he rose from the table and lit his pipe. "They can go everywhere, see everything, overhear every one. Yes, we're doing the reintroduction of these kids again. I expect to hear before evening that they have spotted her. In the meanwhile, we can do nothing but await results. We cannot pick up the broken trail until we find either the Aurora or Mr. Mordecai Smith. Toby could eat these scraps, I dare say. Are you going to bed, Holmes?" "No, I am not tired. I have a curious constitution. I never remember feeling tired by work, though idleness exhausts me completely. I'm going to smoke, and to think about this queer business, to which my fair client has introduced us. It is, if ever man had an easy task, this of ours ought to be. Wooden-legged men are not so common, but the other man must. I should think he's absolutely unique." "The other man again!" "I have no wish to make a mystery of him to you, anyway. But you must have formed your own opinion. Now, do you consider the data diminutive footmarks, toes never fettered by boot, naked feet, stone-headed wooden mace, great agility, small poison darts. What do you make of it? This. A savage! I exclaimed. Perhaps one of the Indians who were the associate of Jonathan Small. Hardly that, said he. When I first saw the strange weapons, I was inclined to think so, but the remarkable characters of the footwork caused me to reconsider my views. Some of the inhabitants of the Indian peninsula are small men, but none of them have left such marks as that. The Hindu proper have long and thin feet. The sandal-wearing Mohammedans have great well toes separated from the others, because the thong is commonly passed between them. These little darts, too, could only be shot in one way. That's from a blowpipe. Now then, where are we to find our savages? South America, I hazarded. He stretched his hands up and looked down a bulky volume from the shelf. This is the first volume of Geister, which is now being published. It may look upon it a very latest authority. What have we here? Andaman Islands, situated 340 miles to the north of Sumatra, the Bay of Bengal. What's all this? Moist climate, coral reef, sharks, port briar, convict barracks, Rutland Island, cottonwoods, and here we are, the how do you say that? The Aubergines, Aubergines of the Andaman Islands may perhaps clear the distinction between the smallest race upon this earth. Though the anthropologists prefer the Bushmen of Africa, the diggers, the Indians of America, and Trilidefrangans, the average height is rather between 4 feet, although many full-grown adults may be found who are very much smaller than this. They are fierce, morose, and intraceable people, though capable of forming most devoted friendships with their confidences has once been gained. Mark that, Mr. Watson. Now then listen to this. They are naturally hideous, having large, misshapen hands, small, fierce eyes, and distorted features. Their feet and hands, however, are remarkably small. So intraceable and fierce are they that all their efforts of British officials have failed to win them over in any degrees. They have always been a terror of shipwreck at crews, branding the survivors with their stone-headed clubs, or shooting with poisoned arrows. These massacres are invariably concluded by a cannibal feast. Nice, amenable people, Watson. If these fellows had been left to their own unaided devices, this affair might have taken an even more ghastly turn. I fancy that even it is, Jonathan Small would have a good deal not to have employed him. But how came he to have so singular a companion? That is more than I can tell. Since, however, he had already determined that Small had come from the Armenians, it is not so very wonderful that this islander should be with him. No doubt we shall know all about it in time. Look here, Watson. You look regularly done. Lie down there on the sofa and see if I can put you to sleep. He took up his violin from the corner, and as I stretched myself out, he began to play some low, dreamy, melodious air. His own, no doubt, for he had a remarkable gift for improvisation. I had a vague remembrance of his gaunt limbs, earnest face, and the rise and fall of his bow. Then I seemed to be floated peacefully away upon a soft sea of sound, until I found myself in a dreamland with the sweet face of Mary Morstan looking down upon me. Whew, a long one. Okay, and what the hell? Okay, I've had 2 people talk, and it didn't appear on my thingy. What the hell, thingy? Hold on, my Twitch chat apparently is refresh. Not cooperating. Sorry, Fleecy, I didn't say hi earlier. And Cyanide Brownie, hello. I don't have alert command, sadly, dude. Also, hello. Yeah, my OBS chat isn't updating. Hold on, let me try and give me a moment. Docs reset doc. Okay, now there we go. Anyways, welcome. Seems a bit smaller than usual. Oh well. I'm glad y'all could stop by. Back. But yeah, I fucking can't with this fucking book anymore. I've run into too many weird phrases. I've been popping them in the Discord. I'm sure Fleecy's seen them. But goddamn it. No luck with Sherlock. It's so fucking weird. Like, seriously, what is with this series and using ejaculated as a verb? And then his hands were far too horny? What is up with that? And then just a great pile of coke upon the jetty. Does that just mean there's literally just he's manifesting? Does that just fucking mean that there's literally because the jetty we found out was a dock or a wharf. Does that mean there's just literally just a giant pile of cocaine there? Because that's so fucking weird. Unless it means something else, I have no idea. But we're flowing right into Chapter 9. Chapter 9, A Break in the Chain. It was late in the afternoon before I woke, strengthened and refreshed. I feel like I'm going to burp or something in the middle of every line here. Sherlock Holmes still sat exactly as I left him, save that he had laid aside his violin and was deep in a book. He looked across at me as I stirred and noticed that his face was dark and troubled. "You slept soundly," he said. "I feared that our talk would wake you." "I heard nothing," I answered. "Have you had fresh news, then?" "Unfortunately, no. I confess I am surprised and disappointed. I expected something definite by this time. Wigglins has just been up to report. He says that no traces could be found at the launch. It is a provoking check for every hour is of no importance. Can I do anything? I am perfectly fresh now, and quite ready for another night's outing." "No, we can do nothing. Merely wait. We go out ourselves. The message might come in our absence, and delay be caused. You can do what you will, but I will remain on guard." "Then I shall run over to Camberwell, and call upon Mrs. Cheryl Foster. She asked me to yesterday." "Oh, Mrs. Cheryl Foster," said Holmes, with a twinkle smile in his eye. "Oh, of course, Miss Morstan too. They are anxious to hear what happened." "I would not tell them too much," said Holmes. "Women are never to be entirely trusted. Not the best of them." Wow, thanks, Holmes. Way to be a selfish dick. A sexist dick. Why did I say selfish? That wasn't the right line. I did not pause to argue over this atrocious statement. Thank you, Watson. I'm glad it's not just me. "I shall be back in an hour or two," I remarked. "All right, good luck. But I say, if you are crossing the river, you may as well return Toby, for I don't think it will be as likely as we will have any use for him now." Watson, the famous icon we need. Yeah, Watson's been a straight up gentleman throughout all of this. Because he has a clear fancy for Mrs. Morstan, but he's literally going out of his way not to take advantage of the situation, even though he realizes if everything works out, she might be beyond his reach. So yeah. Yeah, he's got some real Chad energy, this story. I took our mongrel accordingly and left him, together with a house sovereign at the old naturalist in Pinchin Lane. At Camberwell I found Mrs. Morstan a little wary after her night's adventure, but very eager to hear the news. Mrs. Foster, too, was full of curiosity. I told them all that we had done, suppressing, however, the more dreadful parts of the tragedy. Thus, although I spoke of Mr. Solato's death, I said nothing of the exact manner and method of it, for all was omissions. However, there was enough to startle and amaze them. "It is romance!" cried Mrs. Foster. "An injured lady, 500,000 in treasure, a black cannibal. Wow. Miss Foster, maybe don't open your mouth anymore. And a wooden-legged ruffian. They take the place of the conventional, or the confrontational. It's not confrontational. Conventional. Old dragon or wicked earl." Mrs. Foster, never speak again, if you're just going to say that. "And 2 knights errant to the rescue," said Mrs. Morstan, with a bright glance at me. "Why, Mary, your fortune depends upon the issue of this search. I don't think that you're nearly excited enough. Just imagine what it must be to be so rich, and to have the world at your feet." It sent a little thrill of joy to my heart to notice she showed no signs of elation at the prospect. On the contrary, she gave a toss of her proud head, as though the matter were one of which she took small interest in. "It is for Mr. Thaddeus Solato that I am anxious," she said. "Nothing else of any consequence. I think he has behaved most kindly and honourably throughout. It is our duty to clear him of this dreadful and unfounded charge." It was evening before I left Camberwell, and quite dark by the time I reached home. My companion's book and pipe lay on his chair, but he had disappeared. I looked about in the hopes of seeing a note, but there was none. "I suppose that Mr. Sherlock Holmes has gone out," I said, and to Mrs. Huston at the time she came up to lower the blind. Now, Sal." I don't know what kind of voice to give this woman. "No, sir." No. I don't need to be too high shrill, but I do need it to be old lady. But I just did my generic old lady for the previous woman, who I hope never speaks again.
"No, sir, he's gone to his room, sir. Do you know, sir?"
This is your landlady? What the fuck? She keeps calling you sir every sentence. This woman does not have a lot of self-confidence. Sinking her voice into an impressive whisper.
I am afraid for his health."
"Why so, Mrs. Huston?"
"Well, he's that strange, sir. After you was gone, he walked up and down until I was weary with the sound of his footsteps. Then I heard he was talking to himself and muttered, and every time the bell rang out and came on the stairhead with it, and with 'What is that, Mrs. Huston?' And now he has slammed off to his room, and I can hear him walking away, same as ever. I hope he's not going to ill, sir. I ventured to say something to him about the cooling medicine, but he turned on me with such a look that I do not know how ever I got out of the room."
"I don't think that you have any cause to be uneasy, Mrs. Hudson," I answered. "I have seen him like this before. He has some small matters upon his mind, which makes him restless. I tried to speak lightly to our worthy landlady, but was myself somewhat uneasy, which throughout the long night I still from time to time heard the dull sound of his tread, and knew how his keen spirit was chafing against this involuntarily inaction. We gotta check something here. Yeah, okay, we're good. At breakfast time he looked worn and haggard, with a little fleck of feverish colour upon either cheek. "You are knocking yourself up, old man," I remarked. "I heard you marching about in the night." "No, I could not sleep," he answered. "This infernal problem is consuming me. It is too much to be balked by so petty an obstacle. When all else has been overcome, I know the men, the launch, everything, yet I get no news. I have set some agencies at work, use every means at my disposal. The whole river has been searched on either side. There's no news, nor has Mrs. Smith heard of her husband. I shall come to the conclusion soon that they have scuttled the craft, but there are objections to that. Or that Mrs. Smith has been put on a wrong scent. No, I think that may be dismissed. I have inquiries made, and there is a launch of that description. Could have gone up the river. I considered that possibility too. There's a search party who will work up as far as Richmond. If no news comes today, I shall start myself tomorrow, and go for the men rather than the boat. But surely we shall hear something." Need more water. We did not, however. Not a word came to either there from Wiggins or from the other agencies. There were articles in most of the papers upon the Norwood tragedy. They all appeared to be rather hostile to the unfortunate Thaddeus Shalloto. No fresh details were to be found, however, in any of them, save that any inquest was to be held upon on the following day. I walked over to the Camberwell in the evening to report our ill success to the ladies, and on my return I found Holmes dejected and somewhat morose. He would hardly reply to my questions, and busied himself all evening in an abstruse chemical analysis which involved much heating of retorts and distilling of vapours, ending at last in a smell which fairly drove me out of the apartment. Up to the small hours of the morning I could hear the clinking of his test tubes, which told me that he was still engaging in his malanderous experiments. In the early dawn I woke with a start, and was surprised to find him standing beside my bed, clad in a rude sailor dress, with a pea jacket and coarse red scarf around his neck. What a sight to wake up to! I was watching you while you slept, Watson. I'd prefer it if you didn't. Why didn't you wake me? I didn't wish to disturb you. So you sat there creepily next to my bed? Yes. Do you not see what's wrong with this picture? Alright, back to it. I'm off down the river, Watson, he said. I've been turning it over in my mind. I can see only one way out of it. It is worth trying, at all events. Surely I can come with you, then, said I. No, you can be much more useful if you remain here as my representative. I am loath to go, for it is quite on the cards if some message may come during the day. Though Wigglin was despondent about it last night, I want you to open all notes and telegrams, to act on your own judgment. If any news comes, can I rely upon you? Most certainly. I'm afraid that you will not be able to wire to me, for I can hardly tell yet where I may find myself. If I am in luck, however, I may not be gone so long. I shall have news of some sort or other before I get back. I had heard nothing of him by breakfast time. On opening the Standard, however, I found there was a fresh allusion to the business. With references to the Upper Norwood tragedy, he remarked, we have reason to believe that the matter promises to be even more complex, mysterious than the original supposing. Fresh evidence have shown that it is quite impossible that Mr. Thaddeus Shalloto could have been in any way more concerned in the matter. He and the housekeeper, Mrs. Burstone, were both released yesterday evening. It is believed, however, that the police have a clue to the real culprits, and is being prosecuted by Mr. Anthony Jones of Scotland Yard, with all his well-known energy and scurrility. Further arrests may be expected at any moment. That is satisfactory so far as it goes, thought I. Friend Sherlock is safe. At any rate, I wonder what the fresh clue may be, though it seems to be stereotyped for whether the police have made a blunder. I tossed the paper down upon the table. At that moment, my eye caught an advertisement in the agony column. It ran in this way: Lost. Where is Morgan Smith, boatman, and his son, Jim, left Smith's Wharf at about 3 o'clock last Tuesday morning in the steam launch Aurora, black with 2 red stripes, funeral black with white band. A sum of £5 will be paid to anyone who has given information to Mrs. Smith at Smith Wharf at 221 B Baker Street as to the whereabouts of said Mordecai Smith in the launch Aurora. It was clearly Holmes' doing. The Baker Street address was enough to prove that. It struck me as rather ingenious, as it might be read by the fugitive without seeing in it more than a natural anxiety of a wife for her missing husband. It was a long day. Every time there was a knock at the door or a sharp step passed on the street, I imagined it was either Holmes returning or an answer to his advertisement. I tried to read, but my thoughts would wander off to our strange quest, and the ill-assorted and villainous pair whom we were pursuing. Could there be, I wonder, some radical flaw in my companion's reasoning? Might it be suffering from some huge self-deception? Was it not possible that his nimble and speculative mind had built up this wild theory upon a faulty premise? I had never known him to be wrong, yet the keenest reasoner may occasionally be deceived. He was likely, I thought, to fall into error, though the over-refinement of his logic. His preferences for subtle and bizarre explanations, with the politer and more commonplace one lay readily to his hand. Yet on the other hand, I had seen the evidence, I had heard the reasons for his deductions. When I looked back on the long chain of curious circumstances, many of them trivial in themselves, but all trending in the same direction, I could not disguise myself that even if Holmes' explanation was incorrect, the true theory must be equally outré and startling. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there was a large peal at the bell, an authoritative voice in the hall. To my surprise, no less a person than Mr. Arthur Jones had shown up. Very different was he, however, from the brusque and masterful professor of the common sense who had taken over the case and confidently at Upper Norwood. His expression was downcast, and it was very meek, and even apologetic. "Good day, sir. Good day," said he. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes is out, I understand." "Yes, and I cannot be sure he will be back, but perhaps you would care to wait, take that chair, and try one of these cigars." "Thank you, I don't mind if I do," he said, mopping his face with a red bandana handkerchief. "And a whiskey and soda?" "Well, half a glass. It is very hot for the time of year. I have a good deal to worry and try me. You know my theory about this Norwood case." "I remember that you expressed one." "Well, I have been obliged to reconsider it. I am a debt drawn tightly around Mr. Sherlock, sir. When Poppy went through a hole in the middle of it, he'll prove an alibi which cannot be shaken. From time that he left his brother's room, he was never out of sight from some one or other. So it could not be he who climbed over the roof through the trap door. It is a very dark case. My professional credit is at stake. I could be very glad for a little assistance." Ugh. 2 hour mark? Yeah, that's usually when my voice starts dying. "We all need help sometimes," said I. "Your friend Sherlock Holmes is a wonderful man, sir," said he in a husky and confidential tone, or voice. "He's a man who's not to be beat. I have known that young man go into a good many cases, but I never saw the case yet that he could not throw a light upon. He is irregular in his methods, and a little quick perhaps in jumping at theories, but on the whole, I think he would have made a most promising officer. I don't care who knows it. I have had a wire from him this morning. by which I understand he has got some clues to the Shalato business. Here's the message. Damn, man, you got made into a you got made into a telegram and deliverer. That has an actual name. I can't remember what it is. He took the telegram out of his pocket and handed it to me. It was dated from Poplar at 12 o'clock. Go to Baker Street. It said, if I have not returned, wait for me. I am close on the track of the Shalato gang. You can come with us tonight if you want it to be in the finish. That sounds well. He has evidently picked up the scent again, said I. Then he has been at fault too, explained Jones with evident satisfaction. Even the best of us are thrown off sometime, but of course this may prove to be a false alarm. But it is my duty as an officer of the law to allow no chance to slip. But there is someone at the door. Perhaps it is he. A heavy step was heard ascending in the stair, a great wheezing and rattling as from a man who has sorely put it for breath. Once or twice he stopped, as though the climb was too much for him. At last he made his way outdoor and entered. His appearance corresponded to the sound we had heard. He was an aged man, clad in seafaring garbs, an old pea jacket buttoned up to the throat. His back was bowed, his knees were shaky. Palms sweaty, mom spaghetti. His breath was painfully asthmatic as he leaned towards the... No, actually, his knees were shaky. Palms sweaty, mom's spaghetti. Sorry, had to do it in that voice. It wasn't satisfying otherwise. I might be too immature to be reading classics. His breathing was painfully asthmatic. Sherlock imitated him. Behold, the amazing bars of Watson. Sherlock's just in the background beatboxing. That'd be so goofy to see. There's just like a swarm of detectives just looking at each other like, what? The criminal is standing there dumbfounded. I'd love to see a little animation of that. That'd be hilarious. As he leaned upon a thick oaken cudgel, his shoulders heaved in the effort to draw the air in his lungs. He had a colored scarf around his chin. I could see a little of his face, save a pair of keen dark eyes, overhung by bushy white brows and long gray side whiskers. Although he gave me the impression of a respectful master mariner who had fallen into years and poverty. What is it, my man? I asked. He looked about him in the slow, methodical fashion of old age. It's Sherlock Holmesy. No, that's not the right one. What was my seafarer voice? Give me a moment. It's Sherlock Holmes. No. Was a Gregson War 6? Was a Gregson voice accidentally? No. Was a Gregson voice accidentally my seafarer voice? It might have been. Oh well. Alright. The Gregson voice is accidentally my seafarer voice. Guess we're using it here. Gregson's not showing up in this story anyways. Is Mr. Sherlock Holmes there? Said he. No, but I am acting for him. You can tell me any message you have for him. It was to him himself I was to tell it, said he. But I tell you that I am acting for him. What was it about Mordecai Smith's boat? Yes, I know well where it is, and I know where the men he is after are, and I know where the treasure is. I know all about it. Then tell me, and I shall let him know. It was to him I was to tell, he repeated, with plenty and obscenity of a very old man. Well, you must wait for him.
No, no, I ain't going to lose a whole day to please no one. If Mr. Holmes ain't here, then Mr. Holmes will find it all for himself. I don't care about the look of either of you. I won't tell a word.
He shuffled to the door, but Athelney Jones got in front of him. Wait a bit, my friend, said he. You have important information. You must not walk off. We shall keep you whether you like it or not until our friend returns. The old man made a little run towards the door, but as Athelney Jones put his board back up against it, he recognized the uselessness of resistance.
Pretty sort of treatment, this,
he cried, stamping his stick.
I came here to see a gentleman, and you two, who I never seen all in my life, sees me and treat me in this fashion.
You'll be none the worse, I said. We shall recompense you for the loss of your time. Sit over here on the sofa. You will not have long to wait. He came across us sullenly enough and seated himself with his face resting in his hands. Jones and I resumed our cigars and our talk. Suddenly, however, Holmes' voice broke in upon us. I think that you might I'd offer him a cigar too, he said. We both started in our chairs. There was Holmes sitting close to us with an air of quiet amusement. Yes, I just teleported in. It's just something I do now. Holmes, I explained. You're here, but where's the old man? He is here, said he, holding up the heap of white hair. Here he is, wig, whiskers, eyebrow and all. I thought my disguise was pretty good, but I hardly expected I'd stand that test. Oh, you rogue, said Jones, highly delighted.
Ah, disguise. Clever.
You would have made an anchor and a rare one. You're the proper workhouse cop. Those weak legs have... Oh, wait, no, this is all Jones. You would have made an anchor and a rare one. You're the proper workhouse cop. Those weak legs of yours are worth £10 a week. I thought I knew the glint of your eyes, though. You didn't get away from us so easily, you see. I've been working in that get-up all day, said he, lighting his cigar. You see, a good many of these criminal classes begin to know me, especially since our friend here, who took to publishing some of my cases, so I can only go on the warpath. I'll do some simple disguise like this. You got my wire. Yes, that was what brought me here. How was your case? He's prospered. It has all come to nothing. I had to release the 2 of my prisoners. There's no evidence against the other 2. Never mind. We shall give you 2 others in place of them, but you must put yourselves under my orders. You are welcome to all the official credit, but you must act on line that I point you out. Is that agreed? Entirely, if you will help me on the men. Well then, in the first place, I shall want a fast police boat, a steam launch, to the Westminster Stairs at 7 o'clock. That is easily managed. There is always one about there. I can step across the road and telephone to make sure. Then I shall want 2 staunch men in case of resistance. There will be 2 or 3 in the boat. What else? When we secure the men, we shall get the treasure. I think it would be a pleasure to my friend here to take the box around to the young lady, whom half of it rightfully belongs. Let her be the first to open it. Eh, Watson? It would be a great pleasure to me. Whether regular and irregular proceeding, said Jones, shaking his head. However, the whole thing is irregular. Both must wink at it. The treasure must afterwards be handed over to the authorities until after the official investigation. Certainly, that is easily managed. One other point. I should much like to have a few details about this matter from the lips of Jonathan Small himself. You know I like to work the details of my cases out. There is no objection to my having an unofficial interview with him, either here in my room or elsewhere, as long as he is efficiently guarded. While you're the master of this situation, I have had no proof yet of the existence of this Jonathan Small. However, if you can catch him, I don't see how I can refuse you an interview with him. That is understood, then. Perfectly. Is there anything else? Only that I insist upon you dining with us. It will be ready in half an hour. I have oysters and a brace of grouse, with sometimes a little choice in white wine. Watson, you have never yet recognized my merits as a housekeeper.
What does that mean?
Has he been disguised as the housekeeper all this time? That'd actually be a pretty funny twist. Chapter 10. The End of the Islanders. Our meal was a merry one. Holmes could talk exceedingly well when he chose, and that night he did choose. He appeared to be in a state of nervous exhilaration. I had never known him so brilliant. He spoke on a quick succession of subjects, on miracle plays, on medieval pottery, and on Stradivarius violins. That is a word, and I know it's a very important word. Stradivarius violins, on the Buddhism of Ceylon, and on the worship of the future, handling each as though he had made a special study of it. His bright humor marked the reaction from his black disposition of the previous days. Alhammy Jones proved to be a sociable soul in his hours of relaxation, and faced his dinner with the air of bon vivant. For myself, I felt elated. Thank you for using that word instead. At the thought that we were nearing the end of our task. I caught something of Holmes' gaiety. None of us alluded during the dinner to the cause which had brought us together. When the cloth had cleared, Holmes glanced at his watch, filled up 3 glasses with port. "One bumper," said he. "Successful our little expedition. And now it is high time we were off. Have you a pistol, Watson? I have my old service revolver in my desk. You had best take it, then. It is well to be prepared. I see that the cab is at the door. I ordered it for 6:30. It was a little past 7 when we reached Westminster Wharf. I found our launch awaiting us. Holmes eyed it critically. Is there anything to mark it as a police boat?" "Yes, that green lamp, and by the side. Then take it off." Oh, wait, the first one was probably Holmes. "Is there anything to mark it as a police boat?" "Yes, that green lamp at the side. Then take it off." The small change was made. We stepped on board, and the rope was cast off. Jones, Holmes, and I sat in the stern. There was one man at the rudder, one tending the engine, and 2 burly police inspectors forward. "Where to?" said Jones. "To the tower. Tell them they stop the opposite Jacobson's Law. Why am I saying law? That's not right. Jacobson's Yard." Our craft was evidently a very fast one. We shot past the long lines of loaded barges as though they were stationary. Holmes smiled with satisfaction as we overhauled a river steamer and left her behind us. "We ought to be able to catch anything on the river," he said. "Well, hardly that, but there's not many launches to beat us. We shall have to catch the Aurora, and she has a name for being a clipper. I will tell you how the land lies, Watson. You recollect how annoyed I was at the beginning, balked by so many small things?" "Yes." "Well, I gave my mind a thorough rest by plunging into a chemical analysis. One of the great statesmen have said that the changes of work is the best rest. So it is. When I succeeded in dissolving the hydrocarbon in which I was at work, I came back to our problems at the Shalotto and thought the whole matter out again. My boys have been up in the river and down the river without results. The launch was not at any landing stage or wharf, nor has it returned. Yet it could hardly have been scuttled to hide their traces, though they remained a possible hypothesis if all else failed. I knew this man Smalls had a certain degree of low cunning, but I did not think him capable of anything in the nature of delicate finesse, that is usually a product of higher education. I then reflected that since I had certainly been in London some time, we had evidence that had maintained a continual watch over Pondicherry Lodge. He could have hardly leave at a moment's notice. but would need a little time, if it were only a day, to arrange his affairs. That was the balance of probability at any rate. "Seems to me to be a little weak," said I. "It is more probable that he had arranged his affairs before, or ever he set upon his expedition. No, I hardly think so. The lair of his would be too valuable to retreat, in case of need for him to give it up until he was sure that he could do without it. A second consideration struck me. Jonathan Smalls must have felt that the particular appearance of his companion, however much he may have top-coated him, would give rise to gossip, and possibly be associated with Norwood tragedy. He was quite sharp enough to see that. They had to start from their headquarters under the cover of darkness." Hold on, gotta pop my shoulders. Ah, that felt good. Right, back wherever the hell I was. Making sure it's still caught up. Yep. Okay. I just realized Cyanide Brown followed me. I really need to get some fucking alerts going on in this whole ordeal. I know I'm gonna need them once I hit affiliate for like bits and subscribers too. Oh goodness. That's gonna be something to work out. Anyways. Alright, where was I? He was quite sharp to see that. They had started from their headquarters under the cover of darkness. He would not wish to get back before it was broad light. Now it was past 3 o'clock, according to Mrs. Smith, when they got the boat. It would be quite bright, and people would be about in an hour or so. Therefore, I argued, they did not go far. They paid Smith well to hold his tongue, reserved his launch for the final escape, and hurried their lodgings with the treasure box. A couple of nights, when they had time to see what views the papers took, whether they were under any suspicion, they would make their way under the cover of darkness to some ship at Gravesend, or at the Downs, which no doubt they have already arranged for passage to America or the colonies. But the launch! They could not have taken that to their lodgings. Quite so. I argue that the launch must be no great way off, in spite of its invisibility, and I then put myself in the place of Smalls, and looked at it as a man of his capability would. He would probably consider that to send back the launch, or to keep it at the wharf, would make pursuit easy if the police did happen to get on his track. How, then, could he conceal the launch, and yet have her at hand when wanted? I wondered what I should do myself if I were in his shoes. I could only think of one way of doing it. I might land the launch over to some boat builder or repairer with directions to make a trifling change to her. She would then be removed to his shed or yard, and so efficiently concealed, while at the same time I could have her at a few hours' notice. That's simple enough. God, my voice. My throat. It is just that very simple things which are extremely liable to be overlooked. However, I determined to act on the idea. I started at once in this harmless seaman's rig and inquired at all yards down the river. I drew blank at 15, but at 16, Jacobson's, I learned that the oar had been handed over to them 2 days ago by a wooden-legged man with some trivial directions as to her rudder. "There ain't naught amiss with her rudder," said the foreman. "There she lies, with the red streaks." At that moment, who should come down but Mordecai Smith, the missing owner. He was rather the worse for liquor. I should not, of course, have known him, but he bellowed out his name and the name of his launch I wanted tonight at 6 o'clock, said he. 8 o'clock sharp. Or at 8 o'clock, said he. 8 o'clock sharp, mind, for I have two gentlemen who won't be kept waiting. They had evidently paid him well, for he was very flush of money, chucking shillings about to the man. I followed him for some distance, but he subsided into an alehouse, so I went back to the yard, and happened to pick up one of my boys on the way. I stationed him at the sentry over the launch. He is to stand at the water's edge, wave his handkerchief to us when they start. We shall be lying off in the stream. It will be a strange thing if we do not take men, treasure, and all. You have planned it all very neatly, whatever they are, whether they are the right men or not, said Jones. But if the fare were in my hands, I should have had a body of police in Jefferson's Yard and arrested them when they came down. Which would have been never. This man Smalls is a pretty shrewd fellow. He would send a scout on ahead. Anything made him suspicious. Lie snug for another week. But you might have struck to Dr. Mordecai Smith, then but you might have stuck to Mordecai Smith and been led to their hiding place, said I. In that case, I should have wasted my day, and think that it is 100 to 1 against Smith knowing where they live. As long as he has liquor and good pay, why should he ask questions? They send a message of what to do. No, I thought over every possible course, and this is the best. With this conversation, and had been proceeding, we had been shooting the long series of bridges with the span of the Thames. As we passed the city, the last rays of the sun were gliding across upon the summit of St. Paul. It was twilight before we reached the tower. This is Jacobson's Yard, said Holmes, pointing at the bristle of mast and riggings of the Surrey side. Cruise gently up and down, when here under the cover of the string of lighters. He took a pair of night glasses from his pocket and gazed some time at the shore. I see my sentry at his post, but no sign of a handkerchief. Suppose we go downstream a short ways and lie in wait for them, said Jones eagerly. We were all eager by this time, even the police and stokers, who had been very vague of the idea was going forward. We've no right to take anything for granted, Holmes said. It is certain 10 to 1 that they go downstream, but we cannot be certain. From this point, we can see the entrance to the yard. They can hardly see us. It will be clear night and plenty of light. We must stay where we are. See how folks swore from over yonder in the gaslight? They are coming from work in the yard. Dirty little rascals, but I suppose every one of them has a little immortal spark all about him. You would not think that to look at him. There is no a pretty possibility about it. A strange enigma is a man. Someone calls him a soul concealed in an animal, I suggested. Woodman Reeds is a good upon the subject, said Holmes. He remarks that while the individual is an unsolvable problem, it aggregates in the aggregate. He becomes a mathematical certainty. Let's see what that word means. Aggregate. A whole form of combining several, a material or structure formed from a loosely composited mass of fragments or particles. I see. So like a pearl? Right, I'm going to be right back. I need to get more water.
I've returned. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, back to where we were.
You can, for example, never foretell what any one man will do. What you can say with precision what an average number will be up to. Individuals vary from percentage remain, but percentages remain constant. So say the statisticians. But do I see a handkerchief? Surely there's a white flutter over yonder. Yes, it is your boy, I cried. I can see him plainly. And there is the aura. The aura, cried Holmes. And going like the devil, full speed ahead, engineer. Make after that launch with the yellow light. By heavens, I shall not forgive myself if she proves to have the excuse me. If she proves to have the heels of us. She had slipped unseen through the yard entrance and passed between 2 or 3 small crafts, so that she had fairly got her speed up before we saw her. Now she was flying down the stream, near into the shore, going at a tremendous rate. Jones looked gravely at her and shook his head. She is very fast, he said. I doubt we shall catch her. We must catch her, said Holmes between his teeth. Heap it on stokers. Make her do all she can. Even if we burn the boat, we must have them. We were fairly after her now. The furnaces roared, and the powerful engines whizzed and clanked, just like a great metallic heart. Her sharp, steep prow cut through the river's water and sent 2 rolling waves to right and to the left of us. With every throb of the engine we sprang, and quivered like a living thing. One great yellow lantern in our bow threw a long, flickering funnel of light in front of us. Right ahead, a dark blur upon the water showed where the Aurora lay, and a swirl of white foam behind her spoke of the pace at which she was going. We flashed past barges, steamers, merchant vessels, in and out behind this one and around the other. Voices hailed us out of the darkness, but still the Aurora thundered on, and still we follow closely upon her track. Pile it on, men, pile it on, cried Holmes, looking down into the engine room, where the fierce glow from below beating upon his eager aquiline face. Get every pound of steam you can. I think we gain a little, said Jones, with his eyes on the Aurora. I am sure of it, said I. We shall be up with her in a very few minutes. At that moment, however, as our evil fate would have it, a tug with 3 barges in tow blundered in between us. It was only by putting our helm hard down that we avoided a collision. Before we could round them and recover our way to the Aurora had gained a good 200 yards. She was still, however, well in view, and the murky, uncertain twilight was setting to a clear starlight night. Our boilers were strained to their utmost, and the frail sail vibrated and creaked with the fierce energy which was driving us along. We had thought through the pool, past the West Indian docks, down the long Deepwood ranch, and up again around on the Isle of Dogs. The dull blur in front of us resolved itself now clearly enough in the dingy Aurora, or the dainty Aurora. Ooh. Catch this thing quick, my voice is dying. Jones turned out our searchlight upon her, so that we could plainly see the figures upon her boat. One man sat by the stern, with something black between his knees, over which he stopped. stooped. Behind him lay a dark mass which looked like a new-founded on land dog. The boy held the tiller, while against the red glare of the furnace I could see old Smith, stripped to the waist, shoveling coals for dear life. I may have had some doubt at the first as to whether we were really pursuing them, but now, as we followed every winding and turning which they took, there could be no longer, or there could no longer be any question about it. At Greenwich we were about 300 paces behind them. At Blackwall we could not have been more than 250. I conquered many creatures in many countries during my checkered career, but none did sport give me such a wild thrill in this mad flying manhunt on down the Thames. Steadily we drew in upon them, yard by yard, in the silence of the night as we hear the panting and clinking of the machinery. The man in the stern still crouched upon the deck, their arms moving as though they were busy, while every now and then he would look up and measure with a glance the distance which still separated us. Nearer we came and nearer. Jones yelled to them to stop. We were not more than 4 boat lengths behind them, both boats flying at tremendous pace. There was a clear reach of the river, with barking level upon one side and the melancholy Impalmstead marshes on the other. At our hail, the man in the stern sprang up from the deck and shook his 2 clenched fists at us, cursing the while in a high, cracked voice. He was a good-sized, powerful man, and as he stood poising himself with legs astride, I could see that from the thigh downward there was but a wooden stump upon the right side. At the sound of his strident, angry cries, there was a movement in the huddled bundle upon the deck. It straightened itself into a little black man, the smallest I had ever seen, with a great misshapen head and a shock of entangled, disheveled hair. Holmes had already drawn his revolver. I whipped mine out at the sight of the savage, distorted creature. He was wrapped in some sort of dark ulster or blanket, with left only his face exposed. That face was enough to give a man a sleepless night. Never have I seen features so deeply marked with all bestiality and cruelty. His small eyes glowed and burned with sombre light, and his thick lips were writhed back from his teeth, with grinned and clattered at us with a half-animal fury. "Fire if he raises his hand," said Holmes quietly. We were within a boat's length by this time, and almost within torch of our quarry. I could see the 2 of them, and now as they stood, the white man with his legs far apart, shrieking out curses, and the unhollow dwarf with his hideous face and his strong yellow teeth gnashing at us with the light of a lantern. The light of our lantern. It was well that we had so clear a view of him. Even as we looked and plucked out from under his covering a short round piece of wood, a long like a school ruler, and clasped it in his lips. Our pistols rang out together. He whirled round, threw up his arms with a kind of choking cough, fell sideways into the stream. I caught one glimpse of his venomous, menacing eyes amid the white swirl of the waters. At the same moment, the wooden-legged man threw himself upon the rudder and pulled it hard down, so that the boat made straight for the southern bank, while we shot past her stern, only clearing her by a few feet. We were round after her in an instant, but she was already nearly at the bank. It was a wild and desolate place, where the moon glimmered upon a white expanse of marshland, the pool of stagnant water, the beds of decaying vegetation. The launch was with a dual thud ran up upon the mud bank, with her bow in the air, her stern flushed with water. The fugitive sprang out, but his stump instantly sank into the whole length of the sodden soil. In vain he struggled and writhed. Not one step could he possibly take either forward or backwards. He yelled in impotent rage and kicked frantically into the mud with his other foot. But his struggles only bore his wooden pin in the deeper and the sticky bank. When he brought our launch aside, he was so firmly anchored that it was only by throwing the end of a rope over his shoulder that we were able to haul him out, to drag him like some evil fish over our side. The 2 Smiths, father and son, sat sullenly in the launch, but came aboard meekly enough when commanded. The Aurora herself we hauled off and made fast to our stern, a solid iron chest of Indian workman and stood upon the deck. Workmanship stood upon the deck. This, there should be no question, was the saying that it contained the ill-omened treasure of the Sherlocks. There was no key, but it was considerable weight. We transferred it carefully into our own cabin. As we steamed slowly upstream again, we flashed our searchlight in every direction, but there was no sign of the islander. Somewhere in the dark ooze of the bottom of the things lay the bones of that stranger on our shores. I'm going to guess the gunshots didn't hit him, but startled him, and he choked on his own poisonous dart. That's what I'm getting. See here, said Holmes, and pointing to the wooden hatchway. We were hardly quick enough with our pistols. There, sure enough, just behind where we had been standing, stuck one of the murderous darts which we had known so well. It must have whizzed between us at the instant we fired. Oh, I guess the bullets did hit then. Sorry, I thought he choked on it by the way he was acting. Holmes smiled at it and shrugged his shoulders, as is easy fashion, but I confess it turned me sick to think that the horrible death which had passed so close to us that night. Chapter 11. The Great Agra Treasure. Our captain sat in the cabin opposite to the iron box which he had done so much and waited so long to gain. He was sunburned, reckless-eyed fellow with a network of lines and wrinkles all over his mahogany features, which told of a hard, open-air life. There was a singular prominence from his bearded chin, which marked a man who had not to be easily turned from his purpose. His age may have been around 50 or thereabout, for his black curly hair was thickly shot with grey. His face, in response, was not an unpleasing one, though his heavy brow and aggressive chin gave him, as I have lately seen, a terrible expression moved to anger. He sat now with handcuffed hands upon his lap, and his head sunk upon his breast, while he looked with his keen, twinkling eyes at the box which had been the cause of his ill doings. It seemed to me that there was more sorrow than anger in his rigid, contained contusance. Once he long looked up at me with a gleam of something like humour in his eyes. "Well, Jonathan Smalls," said Holmes, lighting a cigar, "I am sorry it has to come to this." "And so am I, sir," he answered frankly. "If I don't believe that I can swing over the job, I give you my word on the book that I never raised a hand against Mr. Sherlock. That little hellhound Tonga shot one of his cursed darts into him. I had no part in it, sir. I was as great as if it had been my blood relation, but I welted the little devil with the slack end of the rope for it. But it was done. I could not undo it." "Have a cigar," said Holmes. "You had best take a pull out of my flask, for you are very wet. How could you expect so small and weak a man as this black fellow to overpower Mr. Lotto and hold him while you were still climbing the rope?" "Seems to know as much about it as you were there, sir. The truth is that I had hoped to find the room clear. I knew the habits of the house pretty well. There was a time when Mr. Sherlock usually went down to his supper. I shall make no secret of the business. Best defence I can make it is just the simple truth. Now, if it had been the old Major, I would have swung for him with the lights on. I would have thought no more of knifing him than smoking this cigar. I scarce thought that I should be lagging over this young Sherlock, with whom I have never quarrelled whatever." "You are under the charge of Mr. Arthur Jones of Scotland Yard. He is going to bring you up to my rooms. I shall ask you for a true account of the matter. You must make a clean breast of it, for if you do, I hope that I may be of use to you. I think I can prove that the poison didn't act so quickly that the man was dead before he ever reached the room." "That he was, sir. I never got such a turn in my life as when I saw him grinning at me, with his head on his shoulders, as I climbed through the window. It fairly shook me. I'd have half killed Tonga for it if it not scrambled off. That was how he came to leave his club. Some of his debts, too, as he tells me. But I dare I help put you on the track, though how you put on it is more than I can tell. I don't feel no malice against you for it. Does seem to be a queer thing, he added with a bitter smile, that I would have fair claim to know upon 500,000 of the money should spend the first half of my life building a breakwater in the Adamans, and like to spend the other half digging drains at Drattermore. It was an evil day for me when I first clapped eyes upon the merchant acumen. I had to do with the Argon treasure, which never brought anything but a curse yet upon the men who owned it. To him it brought murder, to Major Shorley it brought fear and guilt. To me it meant slavery for life. At this moment Altery Jones thrust his broad face and heavy shoulders into the tiny cabin. "Quite a family party," he remarked. "I think I shall have a pull at that flask, Holmes. Oh, I think we may all congratulate each other. Pity we didn't take the other alive, but there was no choice. I say, Holmes, you must confess that you cut it rather fine. It was all we could do to overhaul her." "All is well that ends well," said Holmes, "but I certainly do not know that the Aurora was such a clipper." "Smith says she's one of the fastest launches on the river, that if he had another man to help him with the agency, we never would have got her. He swears he knew nothing of this Norwood business." "Neither did he," cried our prisoner. "Not a word. I chose his launch because I heard she was a floater. And we told him nothing, but he paid him well, and was to get something handsome to reach our vessel, the Esmeralda, at Gravesend. Now we're bound for the Brazils." I gotta see who's talking here. Okay. "Well, if he has done no wrong, we shall see that no wrong comes to him. If we are quick in catching our men, we are not so quick in condemning them." It was amusing to notice how the consequential Jones had already beginning to give himself. Oh, okay, this is Jones. "Well, if he has done no wrong, we shall see that no wrong comes to him. If we are pretty quick at catching our men, we are not so quick in condemning them." It was amusing to see them notice how the consequential Jones had already beginning to give himself airs on the strength of the capture. With a slight smile up. I scrolled down, I lost it. With a slight smile which played over Sherlock Holmes's face, I could see the speech had not been lost upon him. Well, hopefully he's learned life lessons. "We'll be at Brookston Ridge presently." Oh wait, no. We'll be at Brixton or Bohalen Bridge presently," said Joan. "I shall land you. Dr. Watson, with the treasure box. I need hardly tell you that I'm taking a very grave responsibility of myself in doing this. It is most irregular, but of course an agreement is an agreement. I must, however, as a member of duty, send an inspector with you. Since there is so valuable a charge, you'll drive, no doubt." "Yes, I shall drive. It's a pity there's no key. Now we may make an inventory first. You'll have to break it open. Where's the key, my man?" "At the bottom of the river," said Small shortly. There's no use. There was no use your giving this unnecessary trouble. You have had your work enough already, though, through you. However, Doctor, I shall need you to warn you to be careful. Bring the box back with you to Baker Street rooms. You will find us there on our way to the station." They landed me at Volok's Hall with my heavy iron box and a bluff, genial inspector as my companion. A quarter of an hour's drive brought us to Mrs. Cyril Foster's. The servant seemed surprised at so late a visitor. Mrs. Cyril Foster was out for the evening, she explained, and likely to be very late. Mrs. Morrison, however, was in the drawing room, so to the drawing room I went, box in hand, leaving the obliging inspector in the cab. She was seated by the open window, dressed in some sort of white, a Diamphilis material, and with a little touch of scarlet at the neck and waist. The soft light of the shaded lamp fell upon her as she leaned back in the basket chair, playing over her sweet, grave face, and tinted with the dull, metallic sparkle of the rich coils of her luxuriant hair. One white arm and hand drooped over the side of the chair, and her whole posed figure spoke an absorbing melancholy. At the sound of my footfall, she sprang to her feet, however, in a bright flush of surprise, and a pleasant color of her pale cheeks. "I heard a cab drive up," she said. "I thought that Mrs. Foster had come back early. I never dreamed that it might be you. What news have you brought me?" "I have brought something better than news," said I, putting down the box upon the table, and speaking jovially and blusterously, though my heart was heavy within me. "I have brought you something which is worth all the news in the world. I have brought you your fortune." She glanced at the iron box. "Is that the treasure, then?" she asked, coolly enough. "This is the great argent treasure. Half of it is yours, half of it is Thaddeus Shallow's. You will have a couple of 100,000 each. Think of that, an immunity of £10,000. There will be few richer young ladies in England. Is it not glorious?" I think that I must have been rather overacting my delight that she detected a hollow ring to my congratulations, for I saw her eyebrows raise a little. She gave me a curiosity. "If I have it," she said, "I owe it to you." "No, no," I answered, "not to me, to my friend Sherlock Holmes. With all the will in the world, well, I could have never have followed up a clue which was taxed even his analytical genius. As it was, we very nearly lost it in the last moment." "Pray sit down. Tell me about it, Dr. Watson," said she. I narrated briefly what occurred since I had seen her last, Holmes's new method of search, the discovery of the Aurora, the appearance of Altery Jones, our expedition in the evening, a wild chase down the Thames. She listened with parted lips, shining eyes to my recital of our adventure. When I spoke of the dart which had so narrowly missed us, she turned so white that I feared she was about to faint. "It is nothing," she said, as I hastened to pour her out some water. "I am all right again. It was a shock for me to hear I had placed my friends in such horrid peril." "That is all over," I answered. "It was nothing. I will tell you no more gloomy details. Let us turn to something brighter. This is the treasure. What could be brighter than that? I got leave to bring it with me, thinking it would interest you to first see it." "It would be of great interest to me," she said. There was no eagerness in her voice, however. It had struck her, doubtless, that it might be some ungracious upon her part to be indifferent to a prize which had cost so much to win. "What a pretty box," she said, stooping over it. "This is Indian work, I suppose?" "Yes, it is. Brunel's metal work. And so heavy," she exclaimed, trying to raise it. "The box alone must be of some value. Where is the key?" "Smalls threw it into the Thames," I answered. "I must borrow Mrs. Foster's poker." There was in the front a thick and broad hasp wrought in the image of the sitting Buddha. Under this I thrust the end of the poker and twisted it outward as a lever. The hasp sprung open, and a loud snap. With trembling fingers I flung back the lid. We both gazed in amazement. The box was empty. No wonder it was so heavy. The ironwork was 2/3 of an inch thick of all rounds. It was massive, well made, and solid, like the chest constructed to carry things at a great price. But not one shred or crumb of metal or jewelry lay within. It was absolutely and completely empty. "The treasure is lost," said Mrs. Morrison calmly. As I listened to the words and realized what that meant, a great shadow seemed to pass from my soul. I did not know that this Argentina had weighed me down until now that I finally removed it. It was selfish, no doubt, disloyal, wrong. I could realize nothing save that golden barrier was gone between us. "Thank God!" I ejaculated from my very heart. "Stop that, Watson! You're the only one who uses that adjective. Stop that verb, please. For the love of God, stop it." Have some class. is the third time he's used that as a verb, and it's only for himself. God damn it, Watson. Yeah, to Horny jail with you, Watson. If I had access to my bonk emote, we'd just put a giant page of it. I gotta wait till I'm affiliate till I can put in those emotes. And don't think we have any bonk emotes from Azza either. Damn. Best thing we can do is bop. Ah! She looked at me with a quick questioning smile. Why do you say that? She asked. Oh, awesome, you got a bonk one. Because you are within my reach again, I said, taking her hand. She did not withdraw. Because I love you, Mary, as truly as ever a man loved a woman. Because this treasure, these riches seal my lips. Now that they are gone, I can tell you how I love you. That is why I said, thank God. Then I say thank God too, she whispered, as she drew me aside. Whoever had lost a treasure, I knew that night that I had gained one. All right, we're going to continue the remainder of this story later. Seems to be about a fourth of it left, but my throat is dead. Well, not completely dead, but I'd like to keep it for the rest of the day without being fucking hoarse. So, next time we read Sherlock Holmes, we'll be starting at chapter 12, The Strange Story of Jonathan Small. But that also means that it is time for us to wrap up. Oh wow, we've been going for 3 hours. No wonder my voice is dying. Doing nothing but voices and whatnot. So, I'd like to wish you all a fond farewell and thank you for stopping by. I'm impressed too. I thought you'd be asleep. I hope I didn't keep you awake. Aw, thanks. But as I was saying, I'd like to wish you all a fond farewell and thank you for stopping by. If you like this, follow me on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. And until next time, very well. We'll be we actually have 2 streams scheduled. Yeah, I know. Shocker. I have something scheduled for Friday and Saturday. Both at 6 p.m. PST, which is 9 p.m. EST, Pacific Standard Time to Eastern Standard Time. And I will be having in duels both of those days. The first one will be against, gotta double check the names, Cyanide Brownie, who lurked in my stream today, for a bit. And the second one against IROVT. So, if a Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel interests you at all, those are both going to be tournament duels. I might do something before that too. Got the hiccups for some reason. Anyways, I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.